We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to pick the law, we enforce it. But at the end of the day, each and every man has to go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer, the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is February 3rd, 2016, and we are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in. We're on weeknights, Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. And you can listen live on Spreaker.com and NonPartisanLibertyForall.com, which is the official show website. You can also listen to the archives on a whole bunch of applications. Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter will direct you to, I think, YouTube, SoundCloud, Tumblr, as well as Stitcher. I suggest that if you listen to any of the archives, to listen to them on YouTube. If you want to listen to any of the old ones, you can listen to those on Spreaker. Spreaker has every show I have ever done, and I believe it is show 263. I don't do that. I think that always sounded stupid, where people would say the name or the number of the show when they announce the show. I thought that was just corny, like, welcome to show whatever, and they'd say the name and whatever. I have all that on the event and in the description, so I don't think I need to tell you the name of the show or the number of the show. I think that's just stupid. But anyway, tonight, Ken Schortgen will be joining us. Of course, he joins us every other Wednesday to talk about geopolitics and the economy. So he'll be joining us around 7:30 for a couple hours. So before that, I have a couple stories that I want to get to, and we'll see what we can get through. The majority of them are, of course, part of what's going on with the 2016 presidential race, which I'm really getting sick of. Again, it's a wrestling match. It's a rigged contest. And speaking of that, there was actually an article today that I found that the title was, "Maybe You Heard the System is Rigged." No fucking shit. I've been saying that for years, and I've been talking about it since the show began, I guess, especially the last few weeks, because we've been talking about the presidential election. But anytime I've talked about any election, I've talked about how the election is rigged. And they actually say the exact same thing I do. It says, I don't mean that the election is being fixed by the ballot box or stuffing, or that politicians are buying votes by handing out, walking around money, and neither do I. And they kind of talk about this year and refer to 2008, and they refer to a lot of other things that are going on. Now, I see their point, and it's an interesting article to read. It's from Bloomberg, because it talks about things that are going on. Like, it mentions the 2008 financial crisis. So I guess it does go back a couple years, but mainly they were focusing on 2016. It mentions Bernie Sanders and the economy, the entire economy. it mentions Chris Christie saying the tax system is rigged for the rich. So it kind of refers to a whole bunch of laws along with things going on or things that have happened. And I don't know, and I don't think that they're saying that, oh, well, these are false flag type events or events that were done on purpose to affect an election. But it is, of course, rigged. It's rigged on so many levels. And I have a story. You may have Hillary going to jail. I seriously doubt it. But from what I heard today, based on everything she did, there's no doubt that she committed a crime that she should go to jail for. Now, will she even be indicted on this? It doesn't look like she's worried about it, so I seriously doubt it. And even if she was, when Obama leaves office at the end of the year, don't you think he would pardon her on that? So what happens if this doesn't go until after the election? They don't indict her until then, and she was to win, and then Obama pardoned her. I would assume the VP, I guess, would take over. I don't know exactly how that would work. If she was pardoned before the charges were filed, I guess she would maintain the presidency in that fashion, which would be pretty fucked up. So a lot of this is about Elizabeth Warren. And I guess the writer says that she put the word into political play in 2012 at a speech at the Democratic National Convention, that people feel like the system is rigged against them. So she's kind of talking about, well, it's rigged against them in that the stock market, Wall Street, and that really is. I mean, yes, you can go from somebody that grew up poor to end up being well off, or even being a millionaire. A lot of that, I think, though, is you got to be some fucking genius who creates a program that you can sell for millions or billions of dollars, as opposed to getting rich in the stock market, because that whole Wall Street and all of these companies and that whole thing is rigged. If you can somehow follow the rigging of the system, you could make money that way. But I wouldn't know how to do that. So, yeah, it's not rigged to the point where you can't become or find a middle class, pretty good paying job. But if you're talking about millionaires, if you're talking about people making over, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, even maybe less than that, yeah, that stuff is rigged in a sense that basically what happens, and there's people that get in there, it's a general statement, but it's, families get their kids in. So, for example, someone went to Harvard and then their kid goes to Harvard. And if you look at all of these successful people or people that are running things or multimillionaires. So look at Donald Trump. I mean, he got money from his father. So I think she's more talking about that, although the title is, well, it says the system is rigged. But I kind of took it as that and maybe I misinterpreted the article, because I'm saying that because she says that at the ballot box, that things are, no word would more appropriately describes the 2016 presidential election as rigged. So that agrees with what I'm saying. But I don't think when it comes to your success, how successful you are as a person is totally rigged, or even rigged at all. I think there's a glass ceiling now for anybody who's not part of the elite. And I don't think many people break through. Now, there's some people that do, but I think the majority don't. But what I think has happened is you have to work so much harder to get past that level, where before, not that you didn't have to work hard, you always had to work hard, but as long as you worked hard and you could create opportunities for yourself. Now, I think now you can still do that, but I think it's 20 times harder, or a lot harder, to create an opportunity like that for yourself than it was, 50 years ago. But as far as the elections go, there's no doubt in my mind that every election is rigged. Now, I'm sure there's a couple that get by that, for whatever reason, miscalculations, or somebody didn't do their job, or whatever. But it would never get to the point where Congress was controlled by the people on the lower, under that 1%, or that Congress was controlled just by regular people. Now, when you're talking about 535 people, of course, if you have a few in there that are really in there to do something good and they kind of slip by where the powers that be didn't want them in there, then, that's going to happen. And I think you still have the illusion of freedom that they want to hold on to. But when it comes to president, that's not something that they're going to miss. President, there's no doubt that that's rigged. And you look at all the things going on now, as I mentioned yesterday, they may come back on Trump. I was talking about all this, yesterday's episode, we talked about Trump. And there were all, and his history and how he grew up and all of that stuff. So, and I have a story about Trump today too, making himself look even worse. But so Trump essentially, has a story that he comes from nothing, but really his father lent him $1 million to start his first company. He was running the family business at 25 years old. He is just a pompous ass anyway. But the point there was that they're not telling a lot about the Trump story. I mean, Donald Trump has been a celebrity essentially since the late 70s. And I had talked about yesterday how I would remember seeing on the tabloids stuff about him and Marla Maples when I was a kid. And I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? He just builds buildings. Like, who cares about Donald Trump? But he made himself this big celebrity, and he's done so many things, but nobody's really talking about them. The only things that have been brought up that I'm aware of is just that he bankrupted a bunch of New Jersey casinos. And he gave reasons for that, of course, and what was going on, and the climate, and the economy, and all of these things. But what they can do if he was to get the nomination is basically just pull out all this stuff and destroy him and ensure that the Democratic nominee wins the presidency. Now you bring in this whole thing of Hillary, and as I said earlier, that based on what people in the FBI are saying, at least what I heard, is that she, if it was anybody else, they'd probably be indicted already and be in jail. But based on what she did, that just the crime itself, it should be an indictable and jailable offense. So maybe that's the play there. So you look at all of these things where they have stuff on basically everybody, and essentially, and when I say they, again, I say the powers that be, and I define the powers that be as really the people that run the government, being corporations, lobbyists, secret societies, the CFR, Bilderberg Group, whatever you want to think it is. And I think it's a combination, probably, as I've said before, of all those groups. But again, I think most people realize that it's not Congress, it's not the president that are really running things. It's these groups, whether they're corporations. Banks is another one, world banks. It's not just the U.S. neither. Remember that there's a global economy, and there's global billionaires that are putting money into the U.S. as well. So you have groups. I mean, I don't know exactly what's going on, and I don't know who's really running things and how it all works and whatever. So I just call them the powers that be, and that they control the majority of the elections. And they're even, I think, controlling it, getting to a point where they're controlling cities even, which is getting even more scary. But at least you have this article that initially hints at the elections being rigged, but then it gets more into just life being rigged and success and things like that. I need to read the article in a little more detail, to be honest, but it's anything with Elizabeth Warren, and I can see by looking at it, she's going after the financial system, which is fine, but it's, well, these are all the ones that are rigging everything, and she's leaving a whole bunch of stuff out, like the government. So in the short time that we have left before Ken comes on, I want to try to talk about these two articles real quick. One is, now Ted Cruz is being accused of cheating, supposedly, without getting into too much details, that his team, I guess, of his campaign team, somehow something ended up on Twitter that made people think that the doctor, I always forget his last name and then I remember it, but the doctor that's running for president, that he was going to drop out the race. And Trump, who's a little fucking baby, of course, wants a new election and says that Cruz cheated, and that's how he had won. Because, of course, Donald Trump doesn't lose anything, right? If he loses, it's because somebody cheated. Like, he would probably be the guy that, you played a basketball game with, and he lost because he fouled me. That's why I missed a shot. I get a do-over or some shit like that. So that's just his whole fucking attitude. So, and there was a poll that had just come out that said that Trump is now 25%, Rubio and Cruz are 21%. So we'll see what happens with Trump. I think that for the Democrats, it would be best probably if Trump won, because I think he's the most attackable, if that's a word, which I don't think it is, of all the candidates. Rand Paul dropped out today. I think one of the main reasons he did, among others, was because he also has a Senate race going on. And if he's not going to become president, he did come in fifth with 5% in Iowa, but he's probably better off for right now focusing on the Senate race. And then in 4 years, because senators are elected for 6, he could run again. I think he's like 42. I mean, he's still young. So you have a lot of people that run for president that they maybe run 2 or 3 times and get more well known, and then finally it's their turn to get the nomination. And you saw that with McCain and Romney and other people as well in the past, like Hillary, who's probably gonna get the nomination. The other story I wanted to talk about real briefly is the police went to arrest a man at work because he had violated probation because he had unpaid parking tickets. And supposedly the police say that he ran to get away. Okay, that makes sense. I would too. And then he ends up getting in his car and trying to run the police over, allegedly, and they shot him and killed him. However, he seems to have a shot in the back, that he was shot in the back, an entry wound in his back, which would be impossible if they were shooting from the front. Now, they could say, well, we were being approached by his car and we shot at him, and then the other officer tried to stop him as well and shot him in the back. I mean, they'll make something up. I don't believe anything the police say. I don't believe any fucking thing I hear in the media. None of it. Some of it I'll believe if it makes sense to me, but if it's something that has to do from the comes from the government or comes from the police, I really got to question that, because police can do whatever they want. They can lie. They can plant evidence. They're obviously trained to lie. So people are brought up to, of course, believe what you hear on the news. That is pretty much controlled by the government, and believe the police and believe the government. And it's just a bunch of bullshit. They probably, he was running away and they probably just shot him in the back. And obviously he was unarmed. I don't get that, how all these people get shot when they're driving their car supposedly at police, because unless you're going like really fast trying to hit the police, and why would you even do that? So you're talking about a guy who violated probation from parking tickets, was at his job. He's going to run over police, right? Maybe he wanted to get away and get his fucking tickets paid, or hide out until he had the money to pay his tickets. But really, so he's going to try to kill a couple police officers just over some tickets. That's believable. But everybody will give the cops the benefit of a doubt, of course. One other story I'll just mention real quick, and then we will bring Ken on, is there is a new sex toy. Now, I wanted to bring this up because yesterday I didn't watch it, but I've seen it before, why I wasn't really watching it, and my fiance was watching it. There's this movie called Ex Machina, and it's not a sex movie. She's a robot that artificial intelligence that a guy created, but he created her with working parts. So, he had sex with, he created a few of them and he had sex with them and whatnot. But I'm trying to understand exactly what they're trying to say in this because I try to read through these quickly before the show, that these are sex toys for a game. Now, there was no person. There was just it was supposed to be like a vagina, and they were supposed to, during the game, if something had happened or they rescued a woman, or I don't know. I'm not really into gaming. I have a Nintendo Wii. I don't remember the last time I played it, but I did like the sports games and shit. It was cool, like bowling and boxing and whatever, but football. But I guess they can, which would be really weird if you're playing a game with a bunch of your friends around. Hopefully you're playing by yourself, but I guess you put this thing on and have sex with it. I'll have to look more into this story and maybe do some more research on it, but supposedly that's what it is. I thought originally when I saw the headline that they had actually finally finished a robot that can have sex with you, that it's like having sex with a human. But that's not what it was. It was just the technology of the female parts, and that was it. It was like a metal part. At least that's what it showed. So if they have that part, and I've seen where they have a body, obviously, I don't think it's really that far away, and they could probably do it now. It's just a matter of how lifelike it would be that they could make a female sex toy. I'm sure they could make a male sex toy as well, but it might be, no pun intended, harder to make a male sex toy than a female sex toy. Plus, I think right away most people would think, and I heard a debate on this on another show. I think it was Ellen's show where they were talking about it. But I would think that men would be more apt to get this. Not because that women don't want to have sex too, but that there are a lot more lonely men than there are lonely women, because it's a lot easier for women to just go to a bar, wait for some guys to get drunk, even if she's ugly, and have sex with them, than a man trying to get a woman. So I do have a couple more stories, and we'll leave those probably for the end of the show. But we do have, of course, I have to call him from Skype, but we have our, what would I call him? Our bi-weekly, essentially co-host. I don't know that I call Ken a co-host because he's more like our expert, but our bi-weekly expert and historian on geopolitics and the economy, and you can find him and all of his stories at thedailyEconomist.com. Ken Schortgen. Ken, thanks as always for joining us.
Oh, thanks. Pleasure to be here.
So, how about that sex toy? You interested in some sex toy gaming, or do you actually? Are you a gamer? Do you play games?
Oh yeah,
I guess.
I do an MMORPG called Runes of Magic. Been playing that off and on for the last 5 or 6 years.
Like, what system do you play on? Do you play on your computer?
PC. Yeah, it's a PC game.
Oh, okay. So you don't have like Xbox and all of that, or
No.
Well, I'm assuming this could go with. It probably would work better with a computer. I'm assuming because computers are more sophisticated than an Xbox. But I guess it's like a game where, it could be any type of game. It could be some game where you're fighting against whoever, and you save the girl in the castle, and then she gives you a reward.
Oh, I'm sure there are games like that already out there, but not for me. I got better things to do in life than worry about a machine, sex bot. But the Japanese, you know what? That's where it's going to really sell. Because the Japanese actually right now are going through a stage where both the millennial men and women do not want to get married. A lot of them actually are abstaining from sex, about 40%, and all they want to do is do their own computer gaming and fashion and self-gratification. They actually have a label.
Well, that would be like
they have
self-gratification.
They have a label for those type of people. They're called grass eaters.
Grass eaters.
Yep.
How did they come up with that?
Have no idea. I'm not Japanese, but yeah,
They're
if
like
you just
cows.
want to. If somebody wants to Google search grass eater in Japan,
A cow
whole
will probably
thing.
come up. Oh, if you put it in Japan. If you just put up grass eater,
yeah, probably a cow. An herbivore.
or you get potheads too. So, eating pot.
It's interesting. It's interesting. It's not just the Japanese though. Supposedly, there was a survey taken in Israel, and they had the choice. You could either have your cell phone, your smartphone, or have sex. And 40% of the men who were asked in that, 40% said they'd rather have their smartphone than ever have sex again.
Yeah, but they're not. That I think you had told me that before, and I don't think that they're really thinking of what that means, and you know what I mean. Like, they're asking a question, but it's hypothetical, and they're not really thinking of the ramifications of what that would actually mean.
You'd be surprised. Like, we see on TV, on ESPN, the X Games. That's been a big thing for a little more than a decade. But there was a program on CNBC where they were interviewing a lot of Wall Street, millennials who do the X Games and do the extreme sports. And one of the interesting things is they were interviewing one person who was sitting at a table, and they asked, well, have you ever had any friends die from doing these extreme games? And the guy goes, yeah. In the last 2 years, I've had about 20, 25 friends who died.
Jesus. Well, maybe they weren't friends. They were, acquaintances.
Well, comrades in the extreme,
right.
But, like jumping off of a 2-mile-high ledge with just a parachute, and you don't get the parachute open in time, or it doesn't work, or you're jumping off from a helicopter with a snowboard from a black double diamond type hill.
Yeah,
at a certain time you're gonna the chances are the more times you put yourself in those extreme positions, an accident can happen.
Right, and you would think after all of those people dying, you might want to not do that. But I guess people all have I guess what's important to them, and I guess for some people it's more important to do things like that and possibly die than live. I don't know.
Well, in the 60s, the hippie generation, part of the rebellious nature that came from the fact that after World War II, in the late 50s, when Eisenhower, the 4-star general, was was made president, society got extremely regimented. I don't know if you ever saw some of the older movies, like with Cary Grant and Gary Cooper and all that. You know, in New York or on Wall Street, if you were like Madison Avenue, like Mad Men, that show. Madison Avenue, everybody wore a blue power suit and a bow tie. If you were in journalism, you wore a gray flannel suit. If you were a lawyer, you wore this. If you
It was like uniforms.
Yeah, everything was regimented. Well, at a certain time, you know, you can't express yourself or have any creativity if everything is regimented. You know, take a look at the TV shows. We had Andy Griffith's show, we had Leave It to Beaver, we had Father Knows Best. Everything was just this hunky-dory, happy, black and white, you know, utopia.
Well, there was this porno called Leave It to Beaver, but that's a whole nother story.
You got sex on the brain tonight, I can tell. So anyway, when you got these kids who didn't have to go through the Great Depression, didn't have to go through World War II, the 50s was the greatest economic boom for the United States ever. And you're pretty much given anything, but you're forced to live in this regimented society. It's no wonder that the baby boomer generation, you know, the 60s flower children rebelled.
Do you think that's why that, you know, there's been so many wars that after World War II, which was just happened to be a war that, you know, the U.S. ended up on top, and it happened they happened to come out successful and getting all this money that was owed to them and whatever, but that some of these generals or people involved in the government thought like, because of what happened in World War II, which I think was kind of an anomaly, and it was just, you know, how it was, but that, oh, well, we can just get into a war and we'll fix the economy. Do you think that anybody in government or in the military had that kind of attitude because of World War II?
It wasn't because of World War II. It was because what?
Well, I know they had it anyway, kind of, but
it was the aftermath of World War II.
Well, right. That's what I mean.
All the companies that used to make production goods, like say Ford wasn't making automobiles anymore. They were making tanks. Kaiser Aluminum was making ships. So you create this military complex, and then you end the war. And so they made so much money because of that. You know, the corporatocracy pretty much ran, but the corporatocracy has run Congress going back to the 19th century. When the railroads were being built, you had senators who, there was one story I saw, the senator went into office and he had a net worth of about $75,000. And when he left Congress maybe 30 years later, he was worth $87 million. And that was in the 19th century, because the robber barons and the railroad magnates, they just bought off Congress, you know, gave them stock in the companies or who knows what to make sure that they passed legislation to benefit them. And that's how the monopolies rose. And you finally had Teddy Roosevelt have to break them down with the Sherman Antitrust Act. But you know, corporatocracy in America and the fascism, the combination, you know, the merging of government and corporations, that's been around for pretty much since the beginning.
Yeah. So I know there's a lot of different things going on. So I don't know where you want to start with what the most important story that you think is going on that people need to know.
Well, I figure I'd start with something fun, a little comparison here. Now, have you had a chance to watch the movie The Big Short yet?
The Big Short. Well, no, that was the one I had seen already, and I didn't realize it, and then I told you at the end. Because I remember that you had asked me, and I'm like, no. And then I was thinking about it, and I'm like, that with Kevin
Christian
Spacey
Bale
and
no, that was Margin Call.
oh, you're right, Margin Call.
Yeah, that was
you're
Margin Call. Now, The Big Short. If you want a fun movie that really explains exactly how the housing bubble rose, the credit crisis, the collapse of Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers. Morgan Stanley.
I did. I just saw that at the. That was the one on the newspaper. Was that the one on the newspaper No, that was on Little Kids. Keep going. I might have seen it. That's why I'm trying to figure out if I've seen it or not.
It has Christian Bale. It has Brad Pitt. Who else is in it?
Did it come out recently?
Carell. It's come out about a month ago.
Yeah, I saw it at the movies. It's Steve Carell. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I had just seen it where basically there's this one guy who comes up with this formula, and it's what's his name, who's married to Eva Mendes or has a kid with her, and he shares it. Yeah, Ryan Gosling, and he shares it with a couple people, Steve Carell's group, and that other guy who plays the Hulk, I think, is in it. And they go.
Mark Ruffalo's not in it.
Mark Ruffalo's not in it. Well, I'm thinking of something else. But anyway, yeah, I saw the movie at the theater like a month ago or something.
I've seen the movie a few times, and all of a sudden there was that one point. Okay, you remember when Ryan Gosling's character, his name is Jared Vennett, and he's in there explaining about how to purchase a credit default swap to short the housing market and the CDOs and all that. He gives the explanation of that. Well, I suddenly saw a parallel between the phenomenon of who Jared Vennett is and Donald Trump.
And you think that he was supposed to be...
No. The movie had nothing to do with Donald Trump. But I'm just saying there's a parallel. And what's one of the
But
reasons...
I mean, the character based on him, or...
Oh, God, no. No. This is something I put together.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I want to cite some of the script here and show you about why America is falling towards Donald Trump the same way that Steve Carell's character Mark Baum and Front Point hedge funds fell into what Jared Vennett was trying to sell them.
Because they're morons. I still don't get it, but go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, besides Steve Carell, you had Vinny, who was the guy who the system was totally screwed up and all that. Okay, after they're done with the presentation, they walk back into their office, and Vinny goes, I don't like this. He's playing us. He's got too much skin in the game, and he's dumping his position. And then Steve Carell's character, Mark Baum, says, what if he's right? And Vinny goes, you want him to be right. And Mark Baum goes, yes, I do. The banks have given us 25% interest rates on credit cards. They've screwed us on student loans where you can never get out from under them. And this guy walks into my office and says, those banks got greedy, they lost track of the market, and I can profit off their stupidity? Fuck yeah, I want to be right. And Vinny goes, why don't you hate this guy? He's everything you taught us not to trust.
Yeah, I remember that part too.
Mark goes, I can't hate him. He's so transparent in his self-interest that I kind of respect him. Would I buy a car from him? No. Is he right about the mortgage market? Yeah, let's find out. Now it's that last part, those few last parts of what the phenomenon of Donald Trump is. Okay? He's somebody who walks into the office, who is completely transparent, and everybody knows his self-interest. He's an egoist, and he's seeking power. But he's willing to, where everybody else is masking the problems, whether it's immigration, the economy, our relationship with Russia, our relationship with China, what's going on with ISIS, while everybody else is masking it under political correctness, he's willing to go out there and say how screwed up everything is. And those who are attracted to him are suddenly, you know what? We know who he is. He's a narcissistic billionaire. But my God, he's the only one who's actually talking about this collapse of the American empire and what we are doing that's wrong.
See, I don't even see him like that, to be honest. And I did a show on him yesterday because I don't hear him saying anything that much different than any of the other, I mean, some of the other candidates I do. But, you know, the main thing, and do you know he got nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize? And,
well, yeah, but you can nominate a ham sandwich.
Right. But the reason why, one of the things that I finally figured out why. I was looking at the article briefly, and that I believe it was, and it kind of said this in the article, that instead of attacking, he wants to build up the military so big that people are scared of the military of the U.S. And so it was something about peace through strength is why he was nominated. It actually said that. But I don't know that I see him that way. I mean, what is he to you? What is he saying? That, because I can't stand him. And I did a whole, like I said, I did a whole show on him yesterday about why, you know, his arrogance, his just how he thinks he's so great. He wants to be a celebrity and all of that. I don't think he's that smart. I don't think he's stupid.
Oh, he's incredibly smart, but
see, I don't.
You have to go back. Did you cite any of the Playboy article interview that he did like 10, 15 years ago?
I never read it. No.
Okay. Yeah, I stumbled across it in a different blog, but the whole purpose behind Donald Trump is the Trump brand. Okay, it's all about expanding and creating the Trump brand. And he says in his Playboy interview,
but it's ego.
Of course it is, but you know what? Everybody in politics has ego. Everybody on Wall Street has ego.
No, but he has a bigger ego than anybody.
We know that because we have 24/7 news. Okay, most of the people who have egos, they have egos in the country club.
But
they don't stand in front of the news media and do that.
But so it's about the Trump brand,
right?
And then
it's about the Trump brand. And one of the things he said in that Playboy interview was, when asked the question, he says, you know what? It's my job to build up the Trump brand until I die. Until the very last breath, I'm going to be building the Trump brand.
I think I heard him say that in an interview, actually.
So, what is the ultimate? You know, what is the apex in the United States?
Well, the president is the top thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
now here's something else.
Tell me something I don't know.
But here's an interesting thing about it is it's not just getting the presidency, okay? Because if he has a horrible presidency and he's an absolute, you know, Jimmy Carter, then the Trump brand will go down as a legacy with horrible thing. He wants to be president, and he wants the end result to be great. Because if he is a good president and a great president, then the Trump brand will stand the test of time. So I believe that deep down, he wants to make it better. He wants to succeed. Now, can he do that? Well, it goes back to the article I said. You know, Jared Vennett. Would I buy a car from him? No. But is he right about what he's saying?
No.
And in this land of political correctness, where lies and fraud and deceit and corruption and masking and where Hillary Clinton can break the law so many different ways and she still gets 45% of Iowans to vote for her.
Oh, it's crazy.
You know, see, Hillary Clinton, I don't even worry about Hillary Clinton. I worry about America because I worry about 45% of Iowans who are willing to vote for her. Well, I'm worried about 45% of Iowans who are willing to vote for an absolute nut job in Bernie Sanders.
I'm just trying to figure out who's going to be, because I obviously think that it's totally rigged. So I'm trying to figure out, and I don't know if you heard before, but I've said this to you probably before anyway. I just call them the powers that be because they could be made up of whoever. But that I think the majority of elections are rigged. I mean, at least enough to control Congress, to control the presidency, and they're even getting to major cities now as well. And if you look,
there are times in history where they're not omnipotent. You know, Ronald Reagan was never supposed to win in 1980. He wasn't. He was not the choice of the.
They fucked up. It was Bush.
But what happens is there come certain times when the wave of the people makes anything that they can. Donald Trump.
Yeah, but you know what happened?
Donald Trump.
But hold on for a sec.
Okay.
Let me just say this because I don't want to totally get off topic. Ronald Reagan was also what was it? 81 was also shot. Do you know that Ronald Reagan was one of the few, besides the fact that he was, I think he destroyed so much of this country with his war on drugs and the people that were killed, the people whose lives were ruined, but that's a whole nother issue. But Ronald Reagan was one of those few people who talked about the Trilateral Commission, the CFR. He was out there talking about them. And this is in Rockefeller's book. And they fucking shot him. After that, in 1984, he had them all over to the White House.
Right. Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. Things changed after he was shot, and things definitely changed. As a matter of fact, he was going to get rid of George Bush as his running mate.
Right. So what I'm saying is that they might have fucked up in that, and now I don't think that would happen because they have so much media. But they fucked up in whatever their plan was to get Bush elected. But so they had to go to Plan B. And Plan B was, you know, either they were trying to kill him or they were at least trying to threaten him. And then he changed after that. So essentially they still got control or a certain amount of control over what they wanted by doing that. So what I'm saying is that no matter what, they're gonna be controlling things somehow, because if they fuck it up one way, they're gonna do something another way.
It's not necessarily they're going to control everything per se.
Because they don't want to control everything. It's just certain things.
What it is if they are thwarted on their desires, okay, then they instantly will start creating a new scenario for the next way to, you know, to achieve it. And that's what they did, is they shot Reagan. They sat in the hospital room. They told him what was going to happen or they could kill him, you know, and he played ball. So
exactly,
you know, the thing with Trump is you know, who obviously was the Republican, you know, that they wanted, Jeb Bush. But not a single American wants another Bush in office.
Yeah, but see now, Jeb Bush is not going to get elected.
To Marco Rubio.
But the whole thing is now you have a totally different society where you have the media is totally different, totally controlled by government.
No, the media is bought and paid for. What it is that there's been a frequency change since about the beginning of 2014. Okay, there's been a frequency change. Something in the air. Something in the, you know, in people has changed. It's not just about Trump and the phenomenon in Trump. It's the phenomenon of Bernie Sanders. Last election cycle, it was the phenomenon of Ron Paul. Okay, Ron Paul was probably one election too early. It was just starting to go.
Maybe, you know, they showed numbers in, I think it was New Hampshire and Ohio. You know, and he was right up there. And actually, no, that wasn't the numbers. You know what numbers they showed? They showed how much money people had after Ohio. And Ron Paul was like second in the amount of money he had because so many people donated to Ron Paul's campaign. And it was a grassroots campaign. So that might be true. But the same thing would happen is either they'd come out with some scandal. They'd come out with because they tried that. They tried to say he was racist and
true. But you know what Trump did to supersede it? Like I said, Trump's not stupid. What did he do to supersede it? Okay, he made public that that agreement. Remember with the Republican Party where he went before the press. Yes, I just got done with the Republican National Committee. I signed this that said I would not run as a third party if I don't win the nomination, and they promised to do things fair. And then somebody asked him, well, what if they find out they're not treating you fair? And he said, then everything's up. And so he brought it out public. You know why? Because they did this to Ron Paul. In places like Oklahoma, when they were setting up to do their primary, they actually locked out all the Ron Paul delegates.
Yeah.
Okay.
I heard that.
The Republican Party did this because what I'm saying is 4 years ago, it just wasn't the right timing. Now there's enough people and there's enough, something that everything is changing.
But
40, 50, 60 years of this political correctness, of this affirmative action, of this racism, Black Lives Matter. You know what? It's coming to a head.
But Donald Trump is not Ron Paul. Donald Trump, if you look at his policies, even if you took Donald Trump as is and said, he could do whatever he wants, he'd pretty much come in line with a lot of the things that are being done. He wants more military. He wants more security. He's the one who said, who gives a fuck about freedom of speech? He wants more cameras, more spying. I mean, this is not a guy that, so what if really all he does is he just has a I don't give a fuck attitude and will tell people off. That's really all he does.
But see, if you spend your time figuring out the minutia and is flip-flopping from the past to the present, whatever, then you're going to fail in this. It has nothing to do with that. See, you do not in today's world, people don't vote. They should, but they don't vote in people on issues. They vote in people on charisma. That's how Obama, Hope and Change. Remember that artist who made the poster, Hope, and then Obama did this.
Well, it was also because of what Bush did too.
He had his big speech with those pillars, like it was a Greek, the Colosseum or whatever. That's what it's all about. If anybody would then said, well, you know what bills did you pass in when you were a state senator in Illinois? None.
Well, that's good to me.
None. But they didn't care because it's all about charisma. And
I think the more bills you pass, the worse you are. You're just adding more fucking laws.
But
that's what they judge them on.
What it means is that the media can go after you for everything you signed your
I know,
name.
it's crazy. But
see, they don't vote people in today because we are our politics for the common masses is reality TV, and reality TV is about how outrageous can you do that people remember your name. More people.
That's what Trump is doing. He's trying to get attention.
If you asked around in Nevada, what percentage of people do you think could tell you the name of your governor?
Probably not many. Especially in Las Vegas, where you have a lot of people that probably haven't lived here that long.
In Arizona, I mean, they asked around 15%.
Is it still Jan Brewer?
No, it's Doug Ducey.
Well, at least I knew her.
Yeah, Jan Brewer was around for a long time, but she made a name for herself by standing up to the Attorney General.
I can name the governor of Nevada. It's Brian Sandoval.
Yeah, well, you can because you pay attention to the
Not
issues.
for long, because he's going to run for Harry Reid's seat. But yeah, I mean, it's, and I can name, my county commissioner and all that shit, but I almost don't care. But if you look at 2008, right, talking about Obama, so I'm sure you're aware of this and we might have even talked about it, I don't know, but they had, and they showed the footage in the Alex Jones video. So they told all these reporters they're going to give an exclusive with Obama, and they're going to fly to wherever. So they get them all on the plane, right? Then they get not David Axelrod, but the first press secretary for Obama, the one that went to MSNBC.
Right.
He's on the plane. They're about to take off. Obama's not on the plane, so they're taking off. They're not letting anybody get off. And they're like, well, where's Obama? He had to take care of something, so I'm sorry. So you have all the press in the plane. Then that same weekend was when he met with Hillary. And also in that same weekend, you had the Bilderberg meetings in Virginia. Now, I don't know if, you know, what that means or if that
what it means
was.
Is if you look at the different state primaries, when they left, Hillary was leading with delegates, and then after Bilderberg, all of a sudden, she was gone and Obama took over.
That's that's the point I was getting to. That essentially she could have also challenged, I think, 2 states where there was an issue. I think Michigan and Florida. That there was some issue with delegates that she could have challenged that she didn't. So what I think is that they said he's going to get the nomination, he's going to be the president, and then, you know, we'll give it to you after his term or whatever.
Right. Oh yeah, I fully agree. You know, and you can tell who you know gets in there and is bought and paid tools. So see, Ted Cruz is an interesting thing. His wife worked for Goldman Sachs,
yep.
And she's on the Council on Foreign Relations.
Yeah, which is, let me just be clear again for everybody out there. The Council on Foreign Relations is not a government organization. It has nothing to do with the government. Yet Hillary was there about a month ago reading something to them. They're just a group. It's like, in a way, if we put together a group and then we voted on who we're going to add to our group and we talked about politics and government and things that we want accomplished, I mean, it's ridiculous because it has nothing to do with the government. Yet you have all these former government officials that end up in there along with famous people.
Well, sure. You know, the Council on Foreign Relations was created in 1923.
Yeah, I know.
It was created after Congress refused to ratify the Treaty for the League of Nations. And it grew and became pretty much it's the foreign policy arm of the U.S. government.
Right, but it's not part of the government.
No, of course it's not part of the government. But then again, Federal Reserve's not either, and they control the monetary system. You know, Obamacare,
right, but at least there was a bill, though. I mean, I'm not saying that it's any better, but at least the Federal Reserve was essentially created by the U.S. government. I mean, the CFR was not created by the U.S. government.
No, but, you know.
Same with the Trilateral Commission, which David Rockefeller, started that, which was...
Actually, Brzezinski did.
Well, it was with Rockefeller.
It was with Rockefeller, Brzezinski, Henry Kissinger, and the purpose behind the Trilateral Commission actually was to bring about a technocracy.
It was supposed to be the 3 countries. What? China? Was it China, Russia, and the U.S.?
No, it was.
I thought China was in there as one of them, and because that's what they called it, the Trilateral Commission.
Yeah, I can't remember right off the top of it. I mean, it might be, but the whole purpose behind the Trilateral was to bring about. The Trilateral was created about the same year as the petrodollar went into the system, and the purpose behind that was to eventually try to change the global monetary system away from gold, away from money, and into energy. And this is why, as the petrodollar system is failing, this is why they came up with the carbon credit scheme. Okay? They're trying to transition from one form of energy into another for the global financial system. So whenever you think about climate change and why they're putting so much emphasis on this and carbon credits,
because they're going to
carbon
tax
footprint,
you.
is because they're trying to desensitize the world so that will be the next monetary system. Energy will be the money. And of course, China and Russia and the BRICS are saying, screw you. Our entire economy is built on quote unquote fossil fuels, so get out of town. Which brings us to some of the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. Primarily the price of oil, the deflation, the deflationary recession, and now we are starting to see central banks play the end game. And the end game is what is known as negative interest rates.
So that's negative interest rates from the Fed, right?
From all central banks. The Fed hasn't done it yet, but Peter Schiff.
Are you saying all central banks in the world?
Bank of Japan, Bank of England, the ECB, et cetera. This is what it's going to. This is the final culmination of a currency war that started in about 2011. And the currency war is all these devaluations down to low interest rates, zero interest rate policy, and now they're going to negative interest rates. The purpose behind negative interest rates is that when a economy is in deflation, which means prices are falling. When prices are falling, that means the assets that all of these countries own, or all the elite own, or the debt that the elite owns, okay? Deflation usually means that there's less money moving around, the velocity of money. Well, if they've created so much debt, they can't pay it off. They've never even bothered to pay it off. But these treasury bonds mature at a certain point. And this is why about $5 trillion worth of debt has to be rolled over each year. Well, if you aren't creating new monetary growth, then you're not getting any money back to be able to buy off the debt and then reloan it out. You can't roll it over. So you need inflation, which will create more money, which you can use that money to either pay off the debt or roll over the debt. Deflation kills debt. Though deflation is absolutely perfect. It's absolutely a godsend for people who have cash, who don't have debt, and are solvent, because prices go rock bottom. You can buy anything in a deflationary period if you've got money and you don't have a lot of debt. But we are now a world and a society of debt. There is $557 trillion worth of debt, and the global GDP is only 72 trillion. So there is almost 8 times more debt in the world than there is annual production.
That's crazy.
So since nobody's buying anything, and the banks are going into deflation, and they can't stimulate this artificial growth like they did, from 2011 with all this QE and the zero interest rate policies. The stock market went from 6,600 at its trough all the way to 18,400. Bond price, yields went through the roof. Housing prices, they've created a new housing bubble. Well, the problem is there's no more assets. And this is part of what you saw in the Big Short. The original MBSs were government backed. All of them had AAA, fixed rate mortgages that didn't give you a big return. Well, you only have so many people buying houses that you can put in these securities. Say a mortgage-backed security has 1,000 mortgages in it. Well, if you're creating those by the boatload, at a certain point you're going to run out of people and property that actually is worth a AAA rating.
Right.
So you're going to get somebody who doesn't have the much income or has a worse credit rating. Their FICO score moves from 780 down to 650. So those would be the triple Bs. Then all of a sudden, when you run out of those, to keep the jig going, keep the game going, you have to start doing subprime.
Yeah, but didn't they started lying though, didn't they? And they rated like subprime at like AAA or something like that.
Yeah, and the reason they did that is the ratings agencies used to be private. Well, during the housing bubble, the ratings agencies, Moody's, S&P, Fitch, they all went public. Okay, when you go public, all of a sudden you have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. This is why, with like a company, healthcare company, if they put out a bad drug, They can't be criminally charged for negligence. They can only be criminally charged if they did not do everything possible to uphold shareholder value. That's how screwed up is.
Well, they can't
By
with vaccines neither. They got like a vaccine court.
Yeah, it's a corporate court that's you're gonna lose every time. But the thing about it is with all these mortgage bonds, at a certain point, that they ran out of houses. Nobody could afford. I mean, you remember the interview that they had with those two mortgage brokers, and the guy laughs. He goes, "My firm deals with ninja loans, no income, no job. We don't,
when they went down to Florida.
If I forget to put the income on there, it doesn't matter. Big bank's going to buy it from me on Monday morning. And that's what happened is the big banks will buy all of these mortgages that they wrote up so that they could take them, split them in MERS, and we've talked about MERS before, that database that splits the title from the deed, and then they just bundle it up in a security and sell it. And then, of course, from there, we got the insurance. We got the credit default swap, which was insurance on the bond saying it's going to default. Then you had the derivatives. They use the term synthetic CDOs, but in reality, that's the derivatives. When we talk about derivatives, think synthetic CDOs for all those who have watched the movie. Okay? It's one person will bet on your credit default swap, and then a person will bet on their bet, and then a person will bet on the second guy's bet, and that's derivative. It's a derivative of the original security. It's a derivative of the original insurance policy. Old mathematics term. So anyway,
I heard of derivatives and calculus.
Yeah, calculus, exactly. So anyway, we're getting to negative interest rates. Well, what happens with negative interest rates is there's two different things. The first is negative interest rates between bank lending. A lot of banks, after who got all this free money, they were storing tons of it in the central banks. Like the U.S. banks have $2.5 trillion stored at the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, because aren't they getting interest on it or something?
Exactly.
So, because I remember you talking about that before, that all the banks were storing all their money at the Federal Reserve because they were getting interest on it. So they were like, fuck this, we're not going to loan this out. We're just sit and get interest on it. And, we have no risk and.
Exactly. So the banks could borrow at 0.25% interest or 0 interest. That's what the discount rate was for, ZIRP. So they were borrowing at that, but they were buying treasuries, even low yield treasuries, say the 2-year for 1.25%, or the 10-year for 2%. So they were borrowing billions of dollars at 0 interest rate, and then they were buying treasuries, which were paying them back 2%. Well, for you and I, if we take a few $100s and buy some treasuries, 2% interest is meaningless. But if you're buying billions of dollars worth of it, 2% of that is, between $20 and $200 million. So that's a tidy sum for just borrowing for nothing. Well, the problem is that because that was less risk and better profits for the banks, they didn't lend out to small business. They didn't grow any company. They didn't lend money to common people. So you can't grow the money you can't grow an economy without capital.
Right. And I remember us talking about that, before as well, that the money was just sitting there. They weren't lending anybody out to anybody.
Bingo. So now what's going to happen is that negative interest rates will start at the discount window first, which means that the Fed is no longer going to pay interest for these banks holding money at the Fed. They're going to start deducting money, negative interest rates. So instead of giving you 1% for holding the money, they're going to take 1% from you. So that's at the discount window. Well, over time, if negative interest rates last for any long period of time,
they'll start doing it to people.
Exactly. That's going to get passed down to you and me in our checking account, savings account, CDs, retirements, 401ks, anything that's a paper asset that is run through a banker, broker, or in the system, all of a sudden they will start deducting money from you. It's,
better start buying up the money orders.
Well, there was a time that when you used to get free checking before the 2008 credit crisis.
Yeah, I still get it because I got I've had like the same account since like 2001, and they had never changed it. As long as I have a direct deposit, it's free.
Right. But you got one of the rare banks. A lot of the banks now, even, one, it doesn't have free checking, and two, you're going to pay a fee no matter how much money, unless you have like $250,000 in there. They set it aside a big number. So anyway, if you keep your money in the bank, they're going to start taking fees of it. 1%, a month, a quarter, a year, whatever. So if the banks are going to take money from you for holding it in the bank, what's the first thing that people are going to do?
They're going to take their money out. Because why would you? There's no point right now to have your money in the bank anyway. The only point is to pay bills. But if you have to, you go to fucking money orders and you send money orders to everybody you got to pay bills to. Or you fucking go down there, if it's a business, I'll go down to the electric company and say, here's your fucking cash.
Well, here's something else. If, say, all the people are taking their money out of the bank because they don't trust the bank, well, hell, by going negative interest rates, what you've done is you're also destroying your currency. Okay? Because negative interest rates, that means that the Federal Reserve will pay you to borrow money. It pays to borrow money because you don't have to pay back with any interest. As a matter of fact, negative interest means for the borrower, I got to borrow $1 million, and since it's negative interest rates, at the end of the term, I only have to pay back like $975,000 of it.
You pay back less than
exactly
what you yeah.
So what it is it's going to try to force businesses, corporations, banks, people, home buyers, it's going to force them to try to borrow. And then, of course, what they want is they want everybody to borrow and then spend. And then they hope, the Keynesian dream is that government intervention of credit will cause people to spend. It'll stimulate the economy. Everything goes good, and you get a boom.
And that's when everything gets fucked up. Because
right.
when you have a central bank interfering, things are just supposed to naturally work themselves out based on the markets.
Correct.
And they haven't had that. I don't know if they ever had that. I guess maybe before the Fed, but I don't know what was going on before that. But you obviously are trying to control what happens because, okay, we want this to happen. We think that maybe this will do it, but we don't know. And it ends up doing more damage than good because maybe it will do what they want it to do for a certain amount of time, and then it will destroy something else in the process.
Yeah, and the reason we went off the gold standard is because the government so desperately wanted to increase the money supply.
They needed money, right, for Vietnam.
Yeah, exactly. They needed money for Vietnam to expand the military-industrial complex. So in the 60s, they were expanding the money supply, which was causing the dollar to devalue. And France got hit to a certain point and said, screw this. We don't want any dollars. And any dollars we get, we're going to go to your window and demand gold. So from 1965 up until 1968, France was siphoning pretty much most of the gold away from from Fort Knox, from us, because they were taking every dollar that they had and transferring it to physical gold. So, that happened to 68, and then the window got closed, and then in 71 it got fully shut off, and the world went into a purely fiat system.
So why not everybody borrow money, right? Don't spend any of it, because I'm sure they would have some prepayment penalty. Pay it back for a couple years, and then pay it off and then keep the difference. And then you just made, some money off it.
Well, you could, but you're not a bank. And for us...
Oh, you're saying only banks they'll only do that for banks.
This is why Goldman Sachs became a bank after 2008, so they could go to the Fed discount window. You and I, if we went to a bank to borrow money, we don't get negative interest rates. We don't get zero interest rates. Like I said, it's the same thing from The Big Short. The banks are still charging 25% interest on credit cards. Student loans are out the window.
They're just making a lot more money. So the Fed is pushing the banks to lend out money, and the banks are making a lot more money off it, assuming that they get paid back, of course.
Exactly. And pretty much all of the lending that's being done, whether it's for auto loans, whether it's for student loans, these things, the government has subsidized and backstopped it. 97% of all homes are backstopped by FHA. Of those, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac pretty much control all the mortgages.
I wouldn't touch any of those. I keep hearing the stuff for student loans on the commercials now all over the place. I wouldn't do anything with the government, my student loan. I don't give a fuck. I'll pay it back myself. Thank you.
Well, exactly. But you can't help it because Obama nationalized Sallie Mae. And so that's when Obama nationalized Sallie Mae and took all these student loans under the government's roof. This is when education started shooting through the roof.
My loans got sold off years ago because I have loans going back to like 2001 and 2003 was the last year I had a student loan. So it's more like the kids getting student loans, the past, recently.
Exactly.
Because mine was sold off to a company that's been managing my loan for like 10 years now. So, I don't think anything's going to change regarding that. But either way, I would not want the government to have anything to do with trying to help me or getting rid of some of that money. The same way I wouldn't get a FHA loan if I bought a house, neither. I don't want anything to do with the government and their fucking money, money that they extorted from us, essentially. But I don't want anything to do with any government programs. The only government program I take advantage of, because I paid into it and they robbed the shit out of me, especially this year, $20,000 I paid if you count FICA and all of that shit. And I got like $800 back. Well, I didn't get it back yet, but 20 fucking grand is what they took from me this year. So, and it's probably the most money I've ever made before, but, so I can imagine. I hate when you have these fuckers like Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders saying, and Obama paying their fair share. So if you make $1 billion, right, and you're probably paying, I know one of the differences, I had nothing to deduct. I make too much money to even deduct student loan interest. So I couldn't even deduct that, and I don't own a house, so I have nothing to deduct. I thought about, technically I have a business, but I didn't go through all of the government's bullshit to register my business, and my business doesn't make any money, which I'm sure I could have wrote off all the shit that I bought and whatever, but I'm not even I didn't even want to bother. So essentially, I get screwed. But if you make $1 billion, somehow you're lucky enough, or never mind that. If you say you make $5 million, which is pretty good, but you're not like a multi-millionaire at $5 million, because after taxes, you're probably paying at least, even if you have a bunch of write-offs, you're probably paying at least $2 million in taxes, I would say.
Yeah, but here's the thing that most people don't get, and this is what the Bernie Sanders people who don't understand economics. The rich don't make income. They don't pay an income tax. They don't make income. Everything that they have are assets.
Right.
So
but what
they
I was
pay capital gains,
but
on profits of assets.
But what I was going to say is, I was going to take. My point was going to be how they screw people over. So I'm taking a person that actually gets a check for, say $4 million a year. Fucking take a basketball player who's not, $4 million a year. You're not the best player, but you're not the worst neither. League minimum is like $500,000 or something. So say you're making $4 million a year, plus never mind agent and manager, but we won't even count those. So what I'm saying is the government, right, at least is going to take, if you live in a state with income tax, which luckily in Nevada we don't have any state income tax, it's probably going to take half, right? So somebody like Bernie Sanders would tell somebody who makes $4 million, who just paid $2 million in taxes, that he's not paying his fair share.
Yep.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, sure.
So what I'm talking about is you have these fuckers like Obama and Sanders and Clinton who are all millionaires. Now, Sanders is probably the poorest one in there. But, I mean, what the fuck does he need anyway? I mean, look at him. It doesn't matter. He's going to spend money on some nice clothes. I mean, he's 74 years old. He's an old man. What the fuck does he need? But, I mean, he still pulls in at least $150,000, and I'm sure more as well. I'm sure he has used inside information and things like that. So I'm sure he's fine.
Bernie's got a net worth of $700,000.
Okay, so there you go. So and that's one of the lower. He's on the poor end of Congress.
Exactly.
But $700,000 is still pretty good. But what I'm saying is he's telling these people, and so is Obama's worth at least. I mean, he made $5 million off his book or something alone.
Oh, he made more than that.
He's a multimillionaire. Hillary, between her and Bill, probably have at least $100 million, probably more than that. So
much more. What
I'm saying is you have these people that are saying to the guy who makes, $4 million or $2 million or $3 million, pay your fair share. How is that not paying your fair share if you're paying fucking half your money?
But you're mixing apples and oranges.
Well, I know what you're talking about with capital gains, but that's another.
No. I'll tell you why. It's because you're mixing political division statements with
right. No,
actual economics.
Right,
okay?
right.
They are trying to appeal to the lowest.
Right. Yeah, I know.
They're to the poor who hate the rich because they're poor, and so they'll screw the other guy, and that's why they say it.
I know.
Because they're trying to get those voters. They actually every time they pass one of these tax laws, loopholes. So it's absolute BS when they say they're ever going to tax the rich.
This is what they do.
They just get votes.
You were kind of breaking up there, but this is what they do. Is they'll fucking say shit like that, like you said, on purpose, and people don't know the difference. They'll think if you own a business, you must be a millionaire. So they'll resent that guy who owns like one pizza shop on the corner who's probably making, if he's lucky, like, 60, 70 grand, maybe 100 grand if he's lucky, which is good. But I mean, he's not a millionaire. He shouldn't be getting more taxes. They'll look at him the same way they'll look at Wall Street. And it's like, there's a huge difference here. And that's what they do, is by talking the way they do, they put everybody all in one pool. They'll take the people who have their own small businesses who, do okay but aren't millionaires, and make people think they're just like the people on Wall Street. And they're not.
Sure. But that also speaks to the lack of intelligence in the population.
Well, that's who they're speaking to. They got it. That's why they're able to rig. Another reason why they're able to rig elections, because they got it down to a science. They know the percentage of people that are going to vote. They know who they're aiming things at. That's why I think today with, the technology they didn't have when somebody like Reagan became president, although I still think he did so much fucking damage with the war on drugs. But again, that's another issue. But anyway, with all the
that Reagan didn't start the war on drugs, right?
No, Nixon did. Well, technically, Johnson at the end of his term there had some big crime bill, and then Nixon did. No, but Reagan took it from,
as governor of California,
to a huge. Yeah. He put it on steroids. I mean, sure. Compared to what Nixon did, because if you look at all the effects from the drug war. It's not just arresting people and putting them in jail for drugs. It's police being able to pull you over, harass you, and search you. All these things that factor into it. I mean, there's so much stuff.
Reagan was sort of biased. Okay, a quick side note. I don't know when the break's coming up, but Reagan was sort of biased. Reagan was governor of California in the 60s when Haight-Ashbury and the whole LSD
Black Panthers were around too.
Well, yeah, but the whole LSD trippy thing was going on, and a bunch of uncouth youths who were baby boomers were just wandering around wreaking havoc all across California. So, here's a guy who doesn't understand the generation gap, and he sees what drugs LSD is doing to all these kids. And so that sort of shaped his thing about hating drugs.
To me, that's no excuse. He didn't believe in self-ownership, and, he did the damage that he did. It's still in effect today. There's people that get pulled over, and the police will use the bullshit excuse, I smell marijuana, even though they don't. Like those women that were searched on the side of the road in Texas, cavity searched both of their cavities with the same glove because, I smell marijuana. Oh, we search your car. Oh, well, there's no marijuana. Oh, well, we'll search your person. Oh, well, we'll search your orifices. It gives them an excuse because otherwise, what the fuck are they looking for? The only other thing would be a gun.
But those are state cops. If the people wanted to redress that, then they would vote everybody out of office and then fire the police chief and bring in a new city council.
Well, I know that it's not as easy to just vote out a city council, and I know that especially in Las Vegas, it is not easy because these people, at this point, they're being backed by the federal government. Because if you read the budget for Clark County, all you see are grants from the federal government. They're not just trying to take over Washington. I mean, of course, they're not just controlling elections in Congress. They're getting into big cities and big counties as well. And it's not, unless you live in a really small county, it's not that easy. If you live in a big city.
But Nevada's different because most of your land is owned by the federal government. So
yeah, but I'm just talking about Clark County. I'm just talking about Clark County, where the majority of the land isn't owned by the federal government. It's the rest of the state. There is some, like where the Bundy Ranch is in Clark County, but there's not. The majority of it isn't in Clark County. So I'm just talking about Clark County, and it's not because of that. That they're getting involved. I mean, they're getting involved. Obama has all these meetings with mayors all across the country. There's all this shit that goes on, and it's bad. So, considering or speaking of taking a break, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk more about the economy and geopolitics with Ken Schortgen, although we kind of got off on a whole bunch of other things there, but that's fine. So check out Ken at thedailyeconomist.com. And, of course, check out the show, NonPartisanLIbertyForall.com. If you'd like to call in, you can call in at 702 470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. If you'd like to expedite that process, just send a text with your name, where you're calling from and what you want to talk about, or you can Skype in. Just send a contact request to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. So we will be right back after this. NonPartisanLibertyForall.com, and we're here with Ken Schortgen. We'll be right back.
Japan. But in June 1775, a small group of merchants, planters, and lawyers met in Philadelphia to see whether they might govern themselves. Thomas Jefferson of Virginia rented himself a room and began to circulate among the other delegates. Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania, Robert Livingston of New York, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, and a short, opinionated delegate from Massachusetts, John Adams, who would become Jefferson's friend, then his enemy, and then his friend again. Adams was as voluble as Jefferson was reticent, but he took to the young Virginian right away and thought him tough as a lignum knot.
During the whole time I sat with him in Congress, I never heard him utter 3 sentences together. Though a silent member of Congress, he was so prompt, frank, explicit, and decisive upon committees that he soon seized upon my heart. John Adams.
Jefferson is 33 years old. He's one of the youngest members of the Continental Congress of the United States. He's a provincial from Virginia. He has scarcely ever been out of his home state. He is a shy man. He has perhaps a slight speech impediment, and he has a high-pitched and weak voice and is not given to asserting himself in any way. He's considered a brilliant committee man, but he has no presence in the Continental Congress.
He's not comfortable talking in public. He's not a great orator. In fact, he's, even as a lawyer, not very good at making oral presentations to juries. He's much more comfortable crafting language in private, where he has control.
Over the next 2 years, Jefferson would serve quietly on 34 different committees. He was a master at drafting legislation, had what Adams called a happy talent of composition, and impressed everyone with his hard work. But he was privately suffering.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Fighter Times. France's President Hollande declares state of economic emergency, wants to redefine economic model. This is not the only thing that's going on economically right now around the world. Inflation in France, negative in January for the first time in more than 5 years. Wall Street is in a panic. U.S. stock markets close with biggest losses since September. This was posted on the 15th of January. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 391 points on Friday, making it the largest daily point loss since September of last year. The sell-off was triggered by plummeting oil prices and turmoil in Chinese markets. Now, not only that, but here we go.
For close to 40 years, the John Birch Society has kept a watchful eye on the agendas and progression of the United Nations. The Society has one of the largest research facilities of its kind, which also houses countless articles and documents that analyze and detail UN activity. Using this information, along with commentaries from a host of authorities, some of which you are about to hear, the John Birch Society presents the United Nations, a look into the future.
I believe those individuals in this country, and there are plenty, who believe that we should have the right to own and bear arms, ought to be concerned with what's happening in the United Nations, because they are a threat to us. They would confiscate our guns. There have been proposals made at some of their conventions where they would literally repeal the Second Amendment. And I think that everybody should be alert to this and realize that this is not just fun and games, and this is just not a discussion club that we're dealing with.
I mean, the United Nations is an organization that, if anybody's interested in saving life, when they hear the name United Nations, they should run in the opposite direction.
The United Nations Treaty. And this is how the United Nations is beginning to limit our sovereignty, is through these types of treaties.
Individuals who believe in the right to own property ought to be concerned. Americans believe in that. They're careless about it. Sometimes they allow our governments to regulate too much and to tax us too much. But really, the right of private property ownership is severely threatened by our own government. But it's going to be a lot worse if the United Nations gets involved. There is no way that you can have the concept of private property right. They believe in welfare redistribution, socialist redistribution, that everybody owns everything, and they would take from the wealthy and give to the poor to get an equal balance. Same old story that we've heard for years, but they do not protect the right to own private property by anything promoted by the United Nations.
The election process will become the task of world government monitors. The U.S. Congress, President, judicial system, and state and local government shall exist only as a facade to assure American citizens that they still have a voice in government. Checks and balances among branches of government will be eliminated. The states will become mere subdivisions of the national government, just as the national government will become a subdivision of the world government. The Bill of Rights portion of the U.S. Constitution will be superseded by the UN Convention on Civil and Political Rights. The U.S. Constitution will be supplanted by the UN Charter and consigned to the ash heap of history.
Promoting the ideas of true freedom and liberty, Nonpartisan Liberty for All Radio with Dave Bourne.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All, and we are back. We are here with Ken Schortgen of the Daily Economist, thedailyEconomist.com. If you want to check out his articles, lots of stuff to read there. Always important. Ken, are you there?
I am here.
Oh, okay. I thought you were there. I just wanted to
waiting for your monologue there.
Make sure. So and you can check us out at NonPartisanLibertyForall.com as well as Spreaker.com and a whole bunch of other places to listen to the archives. Immediately after the show, the archives are posted to YouTube, Spreaker, and there's actually a list. If you go to the website, there's a list of places that you can listen to the archives. Again, the best place to listen is YouTube, just because then I can make some money. So far, I've made 7 cents. So I'm trying to build up my piggy bank there. So any help will I'd be grateful. Also, you can donate to the show. I finally got that up and running, where you can donate through PayPal at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com/donate. And if you feel like donating, that's fine. If you want to donate $1, if you want to donate more, I'll take whatever you want to donate, but don't feel obligated. I'm not one of those people who sit and demand that you owe me money or something because you listen to my show like some other people do. So if anybody decides to donate, that's great. If not, that's fine as well. It doesn't allow you to put in decimals, though. So the minimum amount, I guess, that you can donate is $1. Unfortunately, you can only donate in dollars. So, like, you can't donate $1.50. It would have to be $1 or $2. But I'm going to try to find something where you can donate change as well, because everything is appreciated. So, but anyway, again, we're back here with Ken Schortgen. And Ken, I know you had some other things that you wanted to address.
Yeah, last part on negative interest rates, and we're talking with Japan. Japan went in negative interest rates on Friday. And they're going to get hit far worse than the rest who go into negative interest rates, because they've been at zero interest rates and have been in quantitative easing now for more than 20 years. So their economy is completely shot. This is the last bastion of the scoundrel. Now, here's what happens with negative interest rates when it goes on for a long period of time. If the negative interest rate continues for longer or goes deeper, commercial banks may have to set negative interest rates on deposits, which would expand not only the tax on commercial banks, but on households, companies, small businesses, etc., your bank account. This could lead to a silent bank run via a shift of deposits to cash, which of course in turn damages the solvency of the banking system itself. This is why almost always when negative interest rates are put in, capital controls are not far behind. And what I mean by capital controls, Germany today, their legislature is proposing a ban on limiting cash transactions to 5,000 euros.
What about the money so you have a negative interest rate, so the central bank ends up owing the bank? Where do they get that money from? Who owes that money?
Well, the central bank won't owe the banks. The banks go to the central bank for new money, and of course the central bank is more than happy to print it out of thin air and lend it out.
But is it government debt? So what I mean is, say there's a loan for whatever, $10 million that goes to the bank from, say, the central bank. Now, if it's a negative interest rate, right, they are owed money on that $10 million, or do they just give it to them altogether?
Well, whenever new money is created, a bond must be created. Obviously we know about sovereign bonds like U.S. Treasuries.
Right.
The 2-year, the 6-month, the 2-year, the 5-year, 10-year, 30-year. But there's also corporate bonds, municipal bonds. This is ways to create cash. So what's going to happen with negative interest rates is the central bank will go ahead, and this will be a direct borrowing outside of the government to the central bank. The central bank holds its own balance sheet. As a matter of fact, remember the original quantitative easing, Operation Twist. The central bank, the Fed in this case, bought toxic mortgage-backed securities and that from the banks themselves and gave them cash for it. The government had nothing to do with that. This is why the Fed's balance sheet went from $800 billion to $4.5 trillion over the last 4 years. Now, what the Fed does with that, I mean, who knows? They just parked all those bonds, deep into their vaults so that they don't hit the open market, and they can always just burn them up. And heck, they could do that with money. It's printed out of nothing, so they can just burn it all up anyway.
But what I was getting at is it the government that has to pay, that owes the Fed that interest money because they have negative interest rates?
Not what the banks will do, but the government owes $20 trillion.
Well, yeah, I know that.
And so some of that's to the Fed, some of that's to China, some of that's to whatever. But negative interest rates, what it means is that the government then can borrow from the Fed for virtually nothing and use that money to roll over these bonds that are going to be due, say that are paying out a yield of 2 to 3 to 5%, from about 30 years ago, because there are 30-year bonds that are still out there.
So can the government borrow enough money from the Fed to make a difference in the debt because of the negative interest?
Well, it's not going to. They can't borrow from the thing and then just eliminate the debt. They'll borrow and then they'll roll over their debts. But we already know the government borrows an extra $1 trillion per year.
Yeah.
So if you think about it from a standpoint, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. It took from the time the government started, it took 75,000 days to get the first trillion in national debt. It's taken 242 days to get the most recent trillion.
That's crazy.
That means we'll be over 20 trillion by the time Obama leaves next January. And there's a good chance we'll go from 20 to 30 trillion by the year 2020 in just 4 years' time. So anyway, we've got the negative interest rates. One of the things also that happens with negative interest rates is it affects your currency. It makes your currency virtually worthless. So just because you take your money out of the bank as a depositor and hold cash, your cash is losing value each and every day. So what do most people who have the capabilities want to do? They want to get out of the currency and get into assets that are stronger. This is why the dollar has moved, so high on the index compared to everybody else. Everybody else has been devaluing their currency since 2011 in the currency wars, except the dollar. So people are moving, if they've got any capital at all, they're getting out of their own currencies like the yen, the yuan, the ruble, the euro. They're getting out of that and they're buying U.S. treasuries because, one, the dollar's strong. They know it's going to be valuable. And two, they're getting 2% interest. They're not getting stolen from 0% interest or negative interest. And when you have capital flight, that means that money's coming out of your economy, which makes your deflationary recession far worse. This is why negative interest rates is the last bastion of it's the end game, because you have set yourself on a course where anybody who has any money at all is going to get it completely out of your country, out of your currency, out of your economy, out of your system. And this is also why.
Well, what's going to happen, though, if everybody's doing that? Where do you go?
You have an implosion. You have a credit crisis. You have the 2008 credit crisis where there's no liquidity at all anywhere in the world. But it's also why, guess what has been rising since the beginning of the year? Gold and silver. Matter of fact, gold just passed its 200-day moving average. It closed today above 1135. Silver got to $14.90. It's on the cusp of $15 an ounce. We're starting to move back, and even the COMEX is unable to stop it. The world is trying to find some type of value, and they're moving out of their currencies, out of their assets. Everybody's selling from the stock markets. They're all moving into gold and silver.
Yeah, and that's what I still got to get some gold before it's too late, even though I had a bunch, but I no longer possess that gold, unfortunately. So, how long until they did they start negative interest rates yet?
They started them on Friday. And let me tell you something: the reaction in the Japanese stock markets is they did them on Friday.
Well, did they start them in the U.S. yet?
No, but this is from Peter Schiff. Let me see. Peter Schiff on Sunday did an interview, and he said this: I think the Fed is going to have to go negative interest rates before the election because we're going to be in a serious recession.
Yeah, I started reading that article.
We are in worse shape now than in 2007. As a matter of fact, one of the Fed presidents came out a week and a half ago and said, oh, yeah, the interest rate hike in December may have been a mistake, and negative interest rates are not off the table. So the Fed is already dropping out hints that they at any time could move to negative interest rates.
So essentially they should have never moved up. They moved up a quarter point, right?
They moved up a quarter point for a couple reasons. One, because the world was dumping treasuries. Since August, over 500 billion treasuries have been sent back from countries all across the world, and there were no buyers. So what they did was they raised the interest rates. Hold on a second. Cough button there. They raised interest rates on their treasuries to try to slow down the dumping of dollars from foreigners to say, okay, we're going to raise interest rates so the yield on your treasuries that you're holding short term, your dollar reserves are at least worth something a little bit more. That's why they did it.
Why can't a country, and I think Iceland actually kind of did this, be self-sustainable, especially a country like the U.S., who really, if they really wanted to, I think it's obviously too late now, but, maybe 60 years ago, they could have been self-sustainable, even with oil. I mean, doesn't the U.S. have all this oil as well that it's just sitting there in reserves? So the terrain of the country, there's so many things that you can do. You have all these other countries that are small area-wise, and they don't have the same kind of climates where, like, you have Florida, you have California, you have places where you can do different types of agriculture in the Midwest. I mean, couldn't a country like the U.S. just be totally self-sustainable?
Of course they could. But when you pass NAFTA and GATT and the TPP and the TTIP, that says that you don't care about self-sustainability. You are looking out for multinational corporations that produce things in China and sell them in the U.S. They don't care.
I mean, I guess in theory, I'm all for free trade, but
that's not even free trade. No, that's not even free trade.
Yeah, I know what they passed is
they're
not.
They're trying to force other countries to say, you know what, we're going to use cheap labor and don't put tariffs on our goods.
Right.
Even though you're producing them in your country and it costs a little bit more. We're doing it with cheap labor and we're selling it for less than you. But don't put a tariff on us. Here, sign this agreement. That's what it's all about.
I'm just saying my only thing is just tariffs and the government getting involved in trading between companies.
Yeah, but what doesn't the government get involved in?
Well, they get involved in everything, but that's the problem. If companies
of course
said,
that's the problem.
Yeah, if I had a small company and I want to trade with a company in China, that's between me and them. That's the whole thing. If I want to trade between anybody, if I want to trade between somebody down the street, I mean, that's the whole thing with an actual truly free market where it's free. You can do whatever you want as far as sell something to whoever. If you have a willing buyer, or whether they're buying in some kind of currency or whether they're buying in trade or whatever. And I mean, obviously all of these issues, what is the cause of all of these issues? The governments. And
True.
I don't want to just say the U.S. government, because there's other governments too.
Yes, but hold on a second.
But it's all governments.
But hold on a second. There are governments and there are coalitions that are doing that free trade. China.
Yeah,
Russia,
and you don't need a 30 chapter, sorry to interrupt, but you don't need a fucking 30 chapter document that's 1,000 pages for free trade.
Well, yeah, but they're not doing that. That's
no, I know.
The U.S. is doing it.
I'm talking about the
U.S. is doing
TPP
it
and
because
shit
they're
like
trying
that.
to protect the empire. See, this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to protect the dollar hegemony, because that's the only thing we export as a reserve currency. That's our only export is dollars. And they're trying to protect the empire. And in the meantime, China is setting up free trade agreements. Russia's setting up free trade agreements. They just signed a new one with Egypt. And what's happening?
Yeah, and it should be
Europe
a one
and the U.S.
page.
are doing sanctions.
It should be a one-page agreement that says any company, like a free market type agreement, that if any of our companies in our country trade with any of yours, then, they can do that, and that's it, in a one little page fucking document.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit more to it than that. One, you want to ensure that the corporations that are trading with other corporations from different countries, they have the same type of health standards, especially if you're doing food. You want to make sure that you have transparency so that if a corporation, makes a promise, an agreement, that they have the capital to be able to pay you for your goods and services.
But to me, that's not for the government. That's not for the government to do. That's for the corporations to do themselves. And that's where you have, the FDA, and somebody made a what do you call it? A comment about this. I think it was Darryl Perry that said, every piece of is it the FDA that checks out like beef and stuff like that? It was like every piece of Food and Drug Administration.
No, the USDA.
USDA, right? Every piece of beef that was bad that went out, they went through the fucking USDA. So essentially, the way that it should work in a free society is you have companies that's what they do. And then you make that decision. You have ratings companies. You have the people that are buying from the other people, the other company, especially now with the internet, you have ratings, you have this, you have that. And then they make that decision. Hey, is this an accredited company? Do I want to do business with this company in this country? And they check them out and they decide, no, I don't want to do business, or yes, I do. But they ultimately, have that decision. And then you would have companies that would go around and evaluate, say, food companies, for example, as opposed to government agencies fucking doing it.
Well, it is, but it's not being done in the West. It's being done in the East. And this is why there's a battle going on. Okay? There's a battle going on for control of the next global economy, the next global monetary system, the next financial system. This is what's going on in the East, is they're creating free trade agreements, and they're sucking a lot of the old Western partners, whether it's Brazil, Argentina, Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, all these things. Even, Austria. Austria came out this week and said that they're going to facilitate with Russia to bring in the Nord Stream pipeline. Well, what they just did by saying that is they gave the middle finger to the U.S., who has sanctioned Russia, and they said, you know what, we're not going to follow the sanctions anymore. France has already came out after the Davos World Economic Forum and said we're going to lead the way for Europe to stop doing these sanctions, because thousands and thousands of businesses in Europe used to do business with Russia until the U.S. did these sanctions.
And it was over nothing. It was it was over something for the U.S.
It was over Syria.
It was over
Syria.
It was over nothing really for the rest of the world.
Right. It was over Syria because Russia had an agreement with Syria to put in a new pipeline, and the pipeline would have allowed most of Middle East to bypass Saudi Arabia. And without Saudi Arabia, there is no petrodollar system. Without the petrodollar system, there's no reserve currency, and the U.S. is bankrupt. And that's why they created the sanctions, and they went to Ukraine and started the war and started all this thing. Yeah. Because the U.S. hegemony was on the verge of losing the dollar status as reserve currency. So they kicked the can. They were able to kick the can and scare Europe. See, Europe is in trouble because Europe's banks and all that run through SWIFT. And if they cut off Europe from SWIFT by not standing with the U.S. on these sanctions, then all of their banks and economies go instantly collapse.
Well, what about the how China started their own SWIFT system?
They are.
So why don't they use that?
It still takes time. The reason is because China is not a reserve currency yet. To be a reserve currency, you have to have enough money out in the world to be used. Okay, of the $20 trillion that the U.S. has printed, that's the national debt, $14 trillion of it is offshore. It's used by other countries to buy commodities. Well, the yuan doesn't have the ability to sell bonds yet. They have a couple of bond hubs that just were created maybe 4 months ago. You need to have You need to be able to sell bonds to expand your money supply so that the money will be used by all these countries. Once that happens, okay, once they start building up a monetary supply that's outside the country, then countries can then have the option to go and use the yuan and use the new Chinese SWIFT system. That's being done, but it doesn't happen overnight.
Really, what it should be is non-government fucking currency. Is
true,
like,
but you always
Bitcoin.
have to have a centralized system, okay? Because otherwise, a country, say like Egypt, they could just print in hyperinflationary money, and the money would be worthless. So why would you, if you're China, want to sell goods in a worthless currency? So you always have to have something that's going to stabilize and say, 10 Egyptian dinar, I don't know what their currency is.
Yeah, but that's still government.
Is worth 1 Chinese yuan, and that's how you would go ahead and do that.
That's still government currency. I'm talking about currency that does not have anything to do with the government, like Bitcoin's an example. But gold could be an example as well. Why does gold have to have anything to do with the government? It doesn't.
There's not enough gold out there to run simply as
gold and silver. I mean, or
even silver,
any other
there's
precious
not
metals.
enough to run the. I mean, think about it. Like I said, there's $550 trillion worth of sovereign debt around the world. If that means that gold, to be able to facilitate that debt, gold would have to be $64,000 an ounce. Now, it may one day do that. But here's the thing, okay? Lugging around gold is not exactly the easiest thing. If you're dealing with trade, say like $5 million, you can't fly over 8 tons of gold every time you're going to do a trade thing. That's why they use electronic banking.
Right. Well, that's
why they use paper currency.
Well, that's why you know, the same way that it started in the beginning, where they stopped for the same reason. They didn't want to carry around gold, so they'd give it to basically a banker. I don't know what they called them back then.
Yeah, and you got a letter of credit.
They'd give it. Yeah, exactly. So why not go back to something like that, but leave the government out of it, though?
You are.
Yeah, but the government's going to, whether it's China or
the government
whether it's
will always control a currency. As a matter of fact, in the Constitution, Congress is the controller of coinage. Okay, a government will always control the currency. Period.
Not if you fucking overthrow it.
Well, okay, fine. You overthrow it, then you have absolute chaos, and the country looks like Venezuela right now. Countries, sovereign governments will always control their currency. That is from
governments.
day one.
Yeah, governments will always control
their currency.
But nobody's controlling Bitcoin, right? There's no government controlling Bitcoin.
Yeah,
right
and
now.
how much is Bitcoin actually used?
It's used a lot. There are a lot of people accepting it. I actually went to a Bitcoin conference. Now, I'm not an expert in Bitcoin, so I wouldn't be the one to ask.
Name me some big time retailers or governments that are accepting Bitcoin as currency.
There is on the internet.
Well, that's the internet, but that's peer to peer. You just don't have enough. You don't have enough. What's the word? Critical mass.
Well, you can buy the thing that you can buy. What someone was doing was they were buying. This is kind of cheating in a way, but they were buying like gift cards in Bitcoin, and then using the gift cards at the store. Yeah, like it's kind of cheating in a way because really
it's a third party thing. But
yeah,
my point with that, and I'm.
And I don't own any Bitcoin, so I'm not like a big
I don't either, but I'm behind the premise
of Bitcoin. But I do like exactly. Same thing. I'm behind the whole premise of Bitcoin and the structure of that. It's just the thing that always bothered me is it's not backed by anything, but it's not the good thing about Bitcoin is you could travel all around the world and you don't have customs stopping you from doing anything. You can travel all around the world with your fucking money, and they don't know how much money you have or where your money is or any of that.
Now, that may change over time because the blockchain itself, separate Bitcoin from the blockchain. The blockchain itself is suddenly becoming something that's going to revolutionize the global banking system.
Well, the blockchain is a list, and for people who don't know out there as well, because I didn't used to know, but from what I understand, it is the blockchain is basically a list of every single Bitcoin transaction ever that has ever been created. So, if I went and bought something with Bitcoin, it's going to register on the blockchain. If Bitcoin was, people mine Bitcoins. If that, I think any mining of any new Bitcoin, that would be in the blockchain. So, yeah.
Right, but Bitcoin is just one tiny segment of the blockchain. The blockchain is an algorithmic system that regulates transactions.
Right,
now,
but
like
I mean,
said, this is going to revolutionize banking, whether they use Bitcoin or not. They're going to do it for global transactions in other currencies. They're going to use it for whatever. Bitcoin is a separate from the blockchain, though it uses blockchain technology to function.
Right, but
so you got to separate the two.
But the way, but the way Bitcoin uses the blockchain, from what I understand, is it's just a registry of every Bitcoin transaction.
Right. Exactly. And see, here's the thing, okay? Retailers to be able to accept Bitcoin in any fashion, it's easy to
There's
accept
some
gift
casinos
cards.
that actually take it, just
True.
so you know.
But to accept Bitcoin, you have to completely overhaul the software of your point-of-sale systems. You have to change your databases to be able to accept it and to be able to, and there has to be good, solid exchange services. I mean,
yeah, I don't think it's
what killed it was Mt. Gox. Mt. Gox, that fraud that took place there.
Yeah,
it scared so many retailers away. They didn't want to deal with it because where are you going to have a safe exchange?
I don't think that Bitcoin is the end all of cryptocurrency. I mean, it's the main one, it's the biggest one, and it's essentially the first one. But I don't know that Bitcoin is going to be the what ends up as what becomes the biggest cryptocurrency. You know what I mean? There may be another one that comes along that, in 10 years or something that is much better, and that becomes more accepted, and different, bigger companies start to accept that. So I still, as far as what you're saying, I kind of agree, where I don't think it's worth it for most companies right now although they're coming up with a lot of technology that makes it real easy. So the easier it is to set up the technology, just like credit card technology, it's becoming real easy. I mean, you can have it you can have an application on your phone and run fucking credit cards.
Exactly.
And of course you got PayPal and things
Apple
like that.
Pay is coming out.
So as soon as the more technology they come out with, the easier it's going to be to take any type of currency. And I think that's really the future, is to modify technology where it can take any type of currency. But I don't necessarily think that Bitcoin is, as I said, is going to be the one that becomes the biggest and the one that becomes what everybody ends up using.
Well, the problem too is governments are gonna overregulate it so that it's
they are already. I mean, New York, there's no point in even using it, from what I understand.
And that's across the country, because what they did is they changed it to an investment, not a currency. An investment means that every time that you use it, without holding it for a year, you have to document and pay capital gains tax on every single transaction. Well, if you're wanting to use it, 100 times a month, you're not going to do the accounting for capital gains tax on every transaction. So it's moot and meaningless.
There are ways to do it anonymously, though.
Right, but you're going to do that black market, and if you're going to do it black market, you're going to limit your retail base to be able to do it. But you can go to your dentist and make a deal with them to use Bitcoin. That's fine. but you're not going to be buying goods and services from Walmart,
Right.
Target.
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah,
That's
mainstream. No, you're exactly right. You mainstream stuff. I mean, you can go make transactions on the internet with your friends, or you can go to like one of the Silk Road type websites and buy drugs or something. You can do all those type of things, but
and how many of the 80 million retirees, are going to bother to do that? Most of them can't even do email. So,
well, that's true too. But
So
I still haven't learned.
Population.
I still haven't learned enough on how to use Bitcoin anonymously as well. Neither. So I need somebody to help me with that. But yeah, I mean, once somebody shows me though, I'll be fine. But yeah, when it comes down to it, I think we need to do more black market stuff in general, whether it's with Bitcoin or cash, or even anonymous credit cards. I mean, something like that.
Well, that's also why I moved into Carrot Bars, is because my money is kept in gold, and if I need to access it, I just upload it to a MasterCard that is outside the banking system, and it works just like a regular debit card, and my transactions are not tracked.
What was the money again on that to sign up?
What? Well, it doesn't cost anything to sign up.
Well, to sign up and get the gold and become an affiliate and all that.
Okay,
was it like $3.75 or something?
The company, there's it sells gold, affordable gold in gram sizes. So it'd be about $67 a gram. And you can either have it shipped to you in your hand, or you can store it offshore for free. If you need to liquidate it, you can do it with your back office.
But I thought
click the mouse. But what it also does is it has an affiliate program. So if you wanted to make money referring other people to do this, then you can sign up as an affiliate and you can buy a package either from a bronze to a VIP.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
To get 5% to 20%. Bronze, silver's 10, gold is 15, and VIP is 20% on all transactions, whether somebody buys a package, whether they buy gold, et cetera, et cetera. So you can get paid and you can make a business out of it if you refer others to buy gold. And if you think about it, it's not like some other MLM, and this isn't an MLM because it doesn't cost you anything. There are no monthly requirements or auto ships.
What are the fees on that though, on those three packages?
The bronze package costs about $140 right now. Silver is about $340. Gold is $850, and VIP is about $1,800.
Okay, and don't you?
And it's
get
just one
gold
time cost, huh?
Don't you get some additional gold with that as well?
If you buy a silver package, you get 1 gram of gold. And a number of cards where you can get 100 euros off, or $110 off of buying a VIP package. VIP, you get 3 grams of gold, along with all the perks of that. And that's the thing about it is for those who want not only to protect their money offshore, but it's a supplemental business. You'll pay $2,000 just to, register, to go through the licensing to register a business. And here, you're paying one time, and you refer others, teach them how to do it. And
can you upgrade in the future? If you buy a silver package, can you because I want to buy the $1,800 one, but now at the moment
if you start with a certain package like silver. If you want to upgrade to gold or upgrade to VIP, you only pay the difference between the silver and the VIP. You don't have to pay the full price.
And do you get the difference in gold as well?
Yeah, if you bought a silver, you get one. If you upgrade to the gold, you get another gram of gold, and then the VIP, you'll get your 3rd gram of gold.
Okay. Yeah, because Katie's been mentioning that again, and I definitely.
But that's the thing is, a lot of people. This is to me one of the advantages of I'm in the ground floor as these countries start doing negative interest rates, and Japan's not the only one. Switzerland's at negative interest rates. Sweden's at negative interest rates. The ECB bonds are already at Germany, I'm sorry, German bonds are already at negative 50 basis points. That means that if you bought a bond, if you paid $1,000 for a German bond, when your maturity comes, you'll only get like $950 of it back. You don't get any interest, and you actually lose money.
So you said even Switzerland, because I thought they were stable when it came to their financial system.
Since we got just a few minutes, let's get into another story. Switzerland is not only into negative interest rates, okay? Their economy has become so deflationary recession that, get this, Swiss residents are to vote on a countrywide referendum for a radical plan to pay every single adult a guaranteed income of 1,700 euros, or about $2,000 a month. They are about to do the helicopter Ben Bernanke, just dump money on the people because they desperately need them to start spending.
So they're going to give, in addition to whatever jobs they currently have,
exactly.
Well, Bush kind of did that in like 2002. He sent back like a refund check of taxes of like
try to get everybody to spend after 9/11.
So, but are they doing it once, or are they doing it like a monthly, every month?
The Swiss residents are going to vote on the referendum in the next couple months.
I know somebody that lives there that she grew up here. I haven't talked to her. I just became friends with her on Facebook, and it said now she lives in Switzerland. How she got there, I have no fucking idea, because she grew up in the Boston area. But yeah, I didn't know that because you always think of, Swiss bank accounts and all of that stuff, and people, what was the whole thing behind that? Was it that you didn't have to, there weren't restrictions?
No, here's the problem. Switzerland depegged a year ago January, from the euro. It caused their currency to get incredibly strong. And if your currency's strong, that means that your goods cost more when you export them, so you have less buyers. So people have not been buying Swiss goods because their currency is so strong. So this is what they need to do, is they need to get their own people to start, consumers to start buying their own goods.
Well, I mean, the reason why people would store their money in Swiss bank accounts. You know how you'd always hear about for years and years.
Yeah, Switzerland's a neutral country, but that sort of went by the wayside.
Was that why people stored their money in Swiss bank accounts for all these years? Just because it was a neutral country?
Yeah, and during World War I and World War II, Switzerland was not attacked by anybody. And they were willing to bank with everybody, including the Nazis, including, whomever. They're neutral. So they were considered,
Yeah, but years later, I mean, in the past, say 20 years ago, or even in movies, in the past 10 years, they talk about, hey, yeah, we need to, let's go to Switzerland and open the Swiss bank account.
That was until the IRS, the federal government, passed FATCA.
Yeah, which they passed recently. But was that because that in Switzerland they didn't ask a lot of information and they didn't?
Because drug dealers, cartels, everybody, they all have accounts there.
So that's why that they didn't ask any information. They just you store your money there and you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. Basically, any American who has a bank account outside the United States, they're required to give them the information to the U.S. Now, they don't have to. They could say, fuck you.
And you know what the U.S. would do? The U.S. would either fine their banks or they would shut off SWIFT.
See, they have way too much power, man.
Of course they do, but that's what being the singular polar empire and being the singular reserve currency gives you. It gives you that power. It's economic warfare.
Yeah, but how would they know if they gave them all the information of where, like a lot of people will store money or have bank accounts in like the Cayman Islands and stuff like that. How do they know that they've gotten every single person's bank information?
They don't do it necessarily to get every single person. They do it to scare them. It's a way to scare people, Americans, from taking their money and getting it offshore.
And let's because we have a couple minutes. a lot of people don't know this, and I happen to know that they had passed that law. Can you just briefly go over that? And I think it was this is recently, like 2014 or something. I think they passed that law, right?
Yeah, FATCA was a law that the U.S. passed that was sent out to all banks, foreign banks, stating that you have to report all of your American account holders, all of their personal information, all their deposits, everything that they have, and then they have to also report any interest that was paid over that time for that money, and it must go to the IRS so the IRS can chase down Americans who have offshore bank accounts. Now, the one thing about Carrot Bars is Carrot Bars is not a bank. Okay, so any commissions, any money, any gold that is stored, it is outside the banking system completely. FATCA, the IRS can't order them to do anything. They're actually a member of the World Trade Commission, so they have the protection of that corporate body to have their lawyers tell sovereign nations to F off if they want to try to do this.
And they're in Germany, right?
They're in Germany, but they're in 122 countries, and they're opening up a new headquarters. They have a headquarters in Hong Kong.
But where
they have
is
headquarters in Stuttgart, and they have one that's opening in Dubai.
Where does your gold get stored? Can you pick the country?
Not really, but it's in 3 different vaults, and they can move it back and forth depending on if government starts wanting to do something.
So we just got a couple more minutes left, but before you go, and now Arizona's ahead too. So Ken gets up at what time do you get up now?
I usually get up about 5:30.
Well, I get up at actually 5:45, but you're an hour ahead. But
yeah,
but you don't have to. You could get up later if you wanted. But no, I just want to be clear, and if you have anything to add to this, that there are so many laws being passed, and most of them are in the name of terrorism. Like that law, they use to terrorism and drug dealers too, of course. So, if drugs were legal, then that would go out the window, but they still have the terrorists. They're replacing a lot of the drug stuff with terrorist stuff to say, oh, well, now we need to do this because of terrorists. But that was one of the reasons that they passed that law. So what I'm saying is that the U.S. government is passing all of these laws that essentially take away more and more of your freedom and more of your privacy, and you probably don't even know about them because most people don't have offshore bank accounts. So, but if you were to get one in the future, that's something that's going to be reported back to the U.S. government.
And just remember as well, like I said, Germany today put up for a piece of legislation they're going to vote for to limit the amount of cash that they can use euros for transactions. There's going to come a day when the U.S. is going to impose capital controls that you can only take so much money out of the bank on a given day.
Banks try to do that to you now, but not by law.
Hey, the one last thing I want to push through is since last year and in January, there have been 8 retailers that are closing massive number of stores. I'll go through them real quick. Walmart is closing 269 stores. Kmart is closing down more than 24. JCPenney is shuttering 47 stores this year after closing 40 last year. Macy's is closing 36.
Yeah, you had mentioned, I think, a lot of these the last time as well. Did you mention Walmart again?
I did Walmart, but here's some new ones. The Gap is closing 175 stores in North America. Aeropostale is closing 84.
I never heard of that place.
Finish Line, the shoe store, 150 stores. And Sears has shut down 600 over the past year.
And why is that, in your opinion?
Is because the country is the economy is in recession. Consumers are not buying anything, no matter how great they're saying that the economy is. When retail stores,
I know, that's what Obama said in the State of the Union.
The boatloads, thousands of them are closing down in just the past 6 months. and going into this year. I should tell you right there that the consumers are not spending. They're tapped out. They're all in debt, and the government is going to start implementing things like negative interest rates to try to stem the flow and kick the can for a short amount of time. But really, we are headed right towards the a repeat of 2008, only 100 times worse.
I hope people are still gambling at least. But yeah, I know you had mentioned some of those before, but then you have the State of the Union, you have the fucking president just straight up lying and saying how great the economy is.
Oh, and he said, anybody who says that the economy is not good is delusional.
Yeah, he didn't even look at how fucked up that is. He didn't even say, well, the economy's doing good. He said exactly what you said, that they're delusional. For the president to say that is just so fucked up on so many levels. But I know you got to go, so thanks as always. And anything else you want to say before we go?
Nope. If you want to know more about Carrot Bars or check my articles out, I'm over at thedailyeconomist.com, and you can email me or email Dave and go from there.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Ken, as always. You're always appreciated.
Thanks, Dave, and I will talk to you in a few weeks.
All right. Again, that was Ken Schortgen of The Daily Economist. Check him out at thedailyeconomist.com. There are a number of other websites where his articles get published, but the best place to find him is there, and I believe that is his website as well. So that's the best place to find him. And you can also subscribe to, he has an RSS feed, so you could subscribe to that, or I think an email feed where you could get his articles as well, because there's a lot of good, and not just good articles, but important articles about things that are going on in the economy and things that you don't even think about, like he was talking about the negative interest rates. I mean, that's something that most people aren't even thinking about, nor does it end up usually on government media. Maybe you'll see it on like Fox Business News or something, just because that's all they talk about all day, I guess. But it's not something you're going to see unless you're really into news and watching everything. So I would definitely check out Ken's site at least once a week, or subscribe to his articles, and definitely look into Carrot Bars, which I've been wanting to do for a while. I finally got up to the amount of money that I wanted to actually do it, and I blew some money recently, unfortunately. So, but I think what I'm probably going to do is do the bottom package with my fiance, and then we'll just upgrade as we go and get up to the $1,800 package. So, but anyway, we're going to take a quick break. Well, maybe not quick, but we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we still got almost a half hour left. So I have a few more articles to talk about. Also, you can call in at 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. And bring up whatever you want. Or Skype into the show, username NonPartisanLIbertyForall. And you can just send a contact request and let us know your name, where you're calling from, and what you want to talk about. So we will be right back.
Welcome to Illuminati Silver. We tell you the truth about silver. Today is Monday, the 11th of January 2016, and we're suggesting to our viewers and subscribers that they follow the Chinese market, especially its manufacturing data, very closely. It would be a mistake when considering purchasing precious metals to completely ignore what is happening in China.
And welcome to Hannity. And tonight, the Iowa caucuses are only 11 days away. In 2016, Republican frontrunner Donald Trump continues to top his Republican rivals. In a brand new Monmouth University national poll, Trump leads with 36%. Senator Ted Cruz is second. He has 17%. Senator Marco Rubio in third with 11%. Also, a new CNN ORC poll released today out of Iowa now has Trump on top with 37%, Cruz has 26%, and out of New Hampshire, a brand new CNN WMUR poll has Trump leading with 34%, Cruz is in second with 14%. Here with reaction of course, the author of the book, Crippled America, How to Make America Great Again, which is his mantra, 2016, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. Well, there were two polls in Iowa today. The Emerson College poll had you by 10. The CNN poll had you by 11. Why all of a sudden now the big surge? It had been tightening up a little bit.
Well, I think they were right from the beginning. I'm not sure if it was a surge. You know, CNN had us at 33-20 about 2 weeks ago, but nobody wanted to report that poll because it was too much of a lead, so they reported other polls that were closer. Des Moines, the Des Moines paper that I'm not a big fan of, Des Moines Register, and they reported that poll, which I disagree with. But, you know, look, I mean, we've really done well. I've spent a lot of time in Iowa. I love the people of Iowa. We're doing great with the evangelicals, Sean. We're doing great with the Tea Party, and I think we're going to do really well in Iowa. We look forward to it.
Well, you have gotten some criticism from some conservatives about the back and forth between you and Ted Cruz, and I want to ask you about it. Mark Levin is mad at the tone. Rush Limbaugh said, you know, that this is national and populism, not necessarily conservatism. Newt Gingrich said on this program this week that you are demeaning yourself if you get into a fight in this particular case. But the polls show you're winning. So do you go with the polls that it works when you go back and forth, or do you say, yeah, maybe my relationship with Ted Cruz can be repaired?
Well, I have to go with my own thinking. Don't forget, Ted attacked me, and then I attacked him. But he started, and he attacked me pretty viciously. And, you know, first he was laying back, as we all know. It was, you know, everybody, they said in the wake. And, frankly, he attacked me, Sean. So, and I have a lot of respect for Mark Levin. I have a tremendous respect for Rush. Rush has been great for me. Rush has been so amazing. And Mark's been pretty good. I mean, Mark likes Ted, and I think he likes me. But, you know, I have to go with my own thinking. And I talked about the fact that, frankly, I think I'm doing the party a favor, and I think I'm doing actually Ted a favor. The fact that he was born in Canada, he was a citizen of Canada until just 15 months ago, and he's got a problem. We have constitutional lawyers that are coming out saying he can't even run. So how can you have a candidate that you're going to pick as a Republican nominee, and he's not allowed to run for the office of president? That's a big problem. And he has some other problems, like he didn't disclose in his financial papers that he was borrowing money from Goldman Sachs and Citibank, because he wants to be the big, you know, wonderful guy that takes down the banks. But here he is with personal guarantees to Citibank and Goldman Sachs. So, you know, I think it should have been disclosed.
Let me go through. If these polls hold up, you will be the Republican nominee. I know a lot of your agenda, but I want to go over it with 11 days to Iowa, maybe closing argument sort of thing. I know you have said that you would rescind on day one Obama's executive orders. You would build the wall expeditiously. You've been very firm about that. You would raise the standards for who we allow into this country. You would replace Obamacare. You told me, I think you're still for health care savings accounts, correct?
Yes, I like that as a concept. I certainly like it, yes.
Yeah, and ISIS, you would take their oil and bomb the living daylights out of them. Tell me...
I would bomb them, you better believe it.
I want you to expand, for maybe those people, those few people that are left that are undecided in Iowa and New Hampshire. Tell them what else a Trump presidency would look like.
Well, we're going to be strong on the military. We're going to build our military. You know, our military is a mess right now. We've just let it go. There hasn't been proper investment, and our military is going down. I'm in the real estate business. All the time I'm getting listings, Army bases, naval bases. I mean, they're selling everything. I just say, how many bases do they have? Anybody in the real estate industry can tell you, because I'm getting constantly, I get listings for these military bases, and I say, how many are we going to close? We have to create a tremendously strong military. Hopefully never have to use it. but it's got to be so strong that nobody's going to mess with us, Sean, because we're at a very perilous time. I want to take care of our vets, big league, take care of the vets. We're going to strengthen the border. We're going to build the wall. I tell you, Mexico is going to pay for the wall. It's going to be very simple. They're making a fortune. I'm going to also, you know, Carl Icahn, who's a great businessman, endorsed me. Many other businessmen have endorsed me and want to endorse me, the greatest. Unfortunately, a lot of people haven't heard of them, but these are the greatest businessmen in the world, and women. And we're going to have great people negotiating our trade agreements. We're not going to lose $500 billion a year with China like last year. $500 billion in trade deficits with China. It's not going to happen anymore. Japan, Mexico is killing us at the border, but they're also killing us in trade. Ford is building a big plant there, a $2.5 billion plant. Nabisco is leaving Chicago with a big plant, and they're building a plant in Mexico. Why? So we're going to stop all of that. We're going to have people build plants, but they're going to be built in this country. And they're going to want to build them. It's not going to be, we're not going to force them. We're going to build them because we're lowering the taxes. You know, we're the highest taxed nation in the world. When my tax plan, which is very good, which your friend Larry Kudlow, who I respect a lot, loves my plan, when this plan goes into effect, a lot of good things are going to happen.
I like the repatriation.
And we're going to also stop corporate inversion.
Yeah, well, I agree with that.
We're going to stop corporate inversion.
Let me ask you this.
We have companies that are leaving Sean, we have companies that are leaving the United States and moving to Ireland and Europe and Asia. I mean, they're leaving. Pfizer is moving to Ireland. We have major, wonderful companies.
Tax benefits.
That, frankly, because the taxes are so high and because they can't bring their money back into our country, which is ridiculous, even the Democrats, you know, it's amazing. Democrats and Republicans agree the money should be allowed to come back in. Who wouldn't agree? They can't get along. They can't make a deal.
A big part of your campaign is about how America has made stupid deals, and as the president, you would negotiate better deals. You'd blow up the entire Iran deal, which needs to be blown up. You would negotiate better deals with China, better deals with Japan, better deals with Mexico. Here's my question. If you look at the American electorate right now, and I count myself among them, and I'm a registered conservative, I'm angry at Washington, even Republicans, because they have contributed to the debt. They're the ones that allowed Obama's executive amnesty. They wouldn't use the power of the purse. In terms of negotiating with a Congress that has shown itself to have zero to little discipline, how will you hold the line when they want to raise the deficit and the debt? How do you negotiate with those, you know, lifelong politicians if you become the president?
Sean, I guess you know, and people that are in business know, I've been dealing with politicians all my life. I mean, it's fine to deal with politicians. There's nothing wrong with it. You deal with them. You have to cajole and you have to get them in a room. A little like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. You know, they were very opposites in a lot of ways, but they got along and they made deals and the country did well and everybody was happy. They're not doing executive orders like Obama does because not even the Democrats will do what he wants to do. So you have to be able to do this. You know, you mentioned, sadly, the Iran deal. The worst part of the Iran deal is by the time I get there, if I win, but by the time I get there, $150 billion will be spent.
You can't do it.
And then today, well, I don't know if you saw it today,
John Kerry.
Secretary Kerry, he came out and he said, yes, we expect a certain amount of that money to be used for terror.
I have the cut.
Can
you want me to play
this?
it? Let me play it for our audience so they know what you're talking about.
Amazing.
It's outrageous.
I couldn't believe the statement. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that some of it will end up in the hands of the IRGC or of other entities, some of which are labeled terrorist. You know, to some degree, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every component of that can be prevented, but I can tell you this. Right now, we are not seeing the early delivery of funds going to that kind of endeavor at this point in time. I'm sure at some point some of it will.
I just cannot
Sean,
believe
can you imagine
he said that.
Listen, Sean, listen to the stupidity of that statement. He said, well, so far we're happy that they haven't given it to terror, essentially. Why don't they have restrictions? First of all, the money should have never been given back under any... We should have gotten our prisoners back. We then should have said we're not giving... We owe $19 trillion, Sean, $19 trillion. It's going to be because of that really horrible budget deal that was made 2 weeks ago. It's now going up to $21 trillion very quickly, right? So we owe $21 trillion. Here's a guy that says the money we gave them is going to be used for terror. If that's
It's
the case,
scary.
first of all, why do they give them the money?
If Congress-
But second of all, Sean, why didn't they have clauses that it can't go to terror?
It is insane.
It's incredible.
If Congress
I can't
comes
believe
to
he's
you and
even
you're
an
the
intelligent
president,
man.
and they hand you a budget and it's going to blow the deficit through the roof, you're going to hold the line, correct?
I'm going to hold the line. You know, I heard the other day that they want to make the budget, balance the budget within 25 years. I said 25 years? Why 25 years? We can do. Look, we're getting rid of Common Core, even though some people like Jeb Bush, who doesn't have a clue, some people like Common Core. Jeb Bush likes Common Core. Some people like him are weak on immigration. I mean, they're very weak. You know, remember he said they come in as an act of love. We need people that know what they're doing. We spend a fortune on education. We're number 28 in the world, and we're number 1 in spending. We're getting rid of Common Core. There's so many things that we can cut.
All right, stay right
and
there.
And we can balance the budget very quickly.
But do you think in 5 years?
I think over a 5-year period, and I don't know, maybe I could even surprise you.
All right.
But
well,
I mean,
well,
make the country better. I'm not saying skimp. I'm saying making the country better.
I want the country to, I know most Americans are with you, wanting the country to be better and stronger.
Nonpartisan, excuse me, Liberty for All, and we are back. We got about 15 minutes left. Still time to get a call in if you would like. Again, 702-470-7664 or Skype. Send a contact request to NonPartisanLibertyForall. So I was reading this article. I guess the president, I believe today, it could have been yesterday, but went to a mosque in Baltimore, probably because Baltimore is close to D.C. And one of the things that they had pointed out in the article is that in these mosques, and I don't know if they're, you know, if it was like I know Catholics have like Sunday school. So if that's what was going on, because it was mostly kids that were mentioned in the article, but that women or girls essentially aren't treated the same as men are or boys in the mosque. So one, you have them going to a mosque. I don't have any problem with that. I guess that was today because the article was written today at least. But I don't have any problem if he wants to visit a mosque. I don't know how many temples he's visited, if any. Maybe he has, I don't know. Or I'm sure he's visited churches. Temples being, for those who don't know, where Jews go. I don't think I've ever been in a temple neither, because I could care less about religion. But this is where, and don't get me wrong, there's plenty of things about different religions that I do not like. I don't support organized religion. I think it's just a way of control. However, within the Muslim religion at this point, now I know, and this is even fucked up, I think it's disrespectful. There's a picture, I guess Hillary went with him, and that was never mentioned, but there's a picture of him and Hillary, and oh, that's back in 2009 in Cairo. Okay, that's why they didn't mention her going there. That they want, if women come in there, you know, they want them to put on the headscarves and all that. And really what that is, that really pisses me off in a few different ways, because I feel like women have been brainwashed by the religion to believe that they're supposed to do that. And really what it is whether you cover your whole body, which I think is ridiculous, or you cover your head with a headscarf or any of the covering up. Why would you cover yourself up? Now, obviously, you're covering yourself up because you don't want to show yourself to other men, or not that you being that person doesn't, but the religion doesn't. And I think it's very disrespectful to women. And even in the United States, and I see them, you have women wearing these fucking headscarves, which I think is very disrespectful. And it's not just the headscarves. It's also that they separate the boys and the girls. They discriminate against the boys and the girls. There was a quote that I had. I copied it and then I lost it, but I'll be able to find it. But they're not treating girls and women equally within the Muslim religion, whether it's in the United States or other countries. Of course, in other countries, it's a lot different. I mean, there are certain Muslim countries that religion and government are intertwined in the things that they do, where, you know, they'll kill somebody for being raped. They'll kill a woman for being raped because it's her fault, or they'll do all these other things, stone a woman to death. And they don't do that in all the Muslim countries, but they do them in some. But this is from Rachel Raza, a Pakistani Canadian activist. She said, while the free world awaits a Muslim reformation, the leader of the free world shows blatant disregard for gender equality by visiting a mosque that treats females like second-class citizens. Says Rachel Raza, a Pakistani Canadian activist, author, and co-founder of the Muslim Reform Movement, a new initiative that we support advocating for peace, women's rights, and secular governance. This makes our work as activists extremely difficult because equality is one of the main tenets of our reform movement. Now, again, I don't have an issue with any religion. I just don't believe in, or with people, you know, choosing to be part of some religion. I do have an issue if you're forced into religion by threat of death or threat of any other kind. But you have these progressives that go around, talk about, you know, you have Hillary talking about women's rights and saying that, oh, I'll get women equal pay. And you had a little girl ask her that, oh, do you get paid the same amount of money? So they're brainwashing kids to think that, oh, yeah, women don't get paid the same amount of money as men. Now, I'm sure in some situations that is true. Also, it's based on a lot of other things as well. So it's like they're creating a huge issue that I think, if it's an issue, is nowhere near as big an issue as they make it out to be. And again, to actually accomplish that, and that's what she said, I'm going to make sure that, you know, if you do the same job, you get the same pay. So you're going to go through the records of every fucking company, the past of every person, because, again, if you have more experience, why should you not be getting more money? And if you have different types of experiences that contribute to the job, there's reasons why people don't get more money. And a lot of the time, and I guess people could call this discrimination, but, you know, women do have kids. That's a biological function. And some women have kids, leave the work field or leave a business for, you know, a few years and then come back as well. So some women, you know, want to be full-time moms until their kids are a certain age. Some women just take off a couple months and it doesn't affect their job at all. It all depends. But you have on one side, oh, well, this is bad. But if you're a Muslim, it's okay because that's part of their culture. And I believe the headscarves are disrespectful. And I believe you can't have it both ways. And I think all women should be treated equally. Now, if someone's actually doing the exact same job and they have the exact same experience, like say they don't have any experience and they got a job at a cashier at McDonald's, they should be paid the same amount of money. I mean, there's a lot of situations where people should, because a lot of times even men doing the same job and no one's looking at that should be paid the same amount, different amounts of money, because again, you have experience. And how do you say that this job is different than this job and the specifics? And it just gets into a whole fucking thing. But to be against that, but not support the same rights for Muslim women is pretty fucked up. And I support the rights not only for all women, for all people. I think all people should have equal opportunities, as far as I don't think the government should make sure that, because people are born into different families. Some people have different talents. But I mean, as far as if you apply for a job, you should not be discriminated against or things along those lines, that you should have an equal opportunity to apply for that job. And if you're qualified, you should get that job if you're more qualified than somebody else. But it's being hypocritical. He's going to go to a mosque that doesn't treat women the same as men. I don't know what he said about his visit there. I didn't hear anything that he said. But I feel that if you're going to go to a mosque, if you can find one, go to one that treats the women equally. And this is in the U.S. And you still have women being disrespected by wearing headscarves. And please explain to me how that is not disrespect. Making somebody cover themselves up, how that's not disrespect. I mean, the burqa is worse enough, but even covering up your head, how that is not disrespectful to women, because that's where it came from. So if anyone wants to, I'm open to listening. If somebody wants to explain that and somehow back it up. But that's all we have for tonight. I'd again like to thank Ken Schortgen, who will be back on the 17th as he joins us every other week, every other Wednesday. So I'd like to thank him. Please go to his website, thedailyeconomist.com, and check out his articles or subscribe via RSS feed or email. And please go to NonPartisanLibertyForall.com. Check us out. And go to youtube.com/user/nonpartisan, I think. Or search Nonpartisan Liberty for All on YouTube. and listen to our archives there, because then they advertise and I can get some more pennies. So thanks everybody for listening. I really appreciate it, and have a good night. Oh, and we'll be back tomorrow.